Good evening. We are Paradox Media. Secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a rocky mountain high. Get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners and settle down snugly at mile marker 419.9 in colorful Colorado. It is Saturday, September 21st, Sunday, September 22nd for those of you on the East Coast and beyond. Welcome to Late Night in the Rockies. Hope you had a rockin' week, an awesome day, and an even better evening. I am your host, TessaTNT, and I'm live tonight from beautiful Bayfield, Colorado. We Are Paradox Media is played live nightly on Spreaker, Twitter, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, CastBox, Tumblr, YouTube, SoundCloud, as well as TuneIn Radio. Tonight, I have a treat for all my guys and gals out there. Tonight, we will be talking to and getting to know Mr. Steve E. Asher. And Steve Asher is a paranormal researcher and radio host. Steve E. Asher is also a freelance writer and artist, as well as a lover of music. Previously, he worked over 10 years in law enforcement and is as a correctional officer. Steve is a longtime researcher of the paranormal. He has traveled worldwide, most recently to Thailand, where he and his wife adopted one of their two sons, where he also studied the ghost culture. Steve is an avid lover of the nighttime. He has said this is when he feels most truly alive in the darkness of the night, and therefore most productive in his paranormal research and writing. He is a native of Princeton, Kentucky. Hey Steve, welcome and thanks so much for being on the show tonight.
Hey, Tessa, I appreciate you having me on. It's an honor.
It's been awesome. So how's your weekend going so far?
Well, other than chasing dogs, I'm doing pretty well. As we were talking off air, we've got a couple little ones, and I have my studio here on property out here on location, and it got out and was running in this and that. So hopefully I don't sound too out of breath.
You sound just great. So how did you first get interested in the paranormal? Did you have any paranormal experiences as a kid that you'd like to paint a picture for us about?
Well, sure. I'll tell you, it's one of those type of things, and if you've had any sort of experiences as a young kid, it's more or less, what was the old joke, I didn't choose the thug life chose me. It's kind of like that, the paranormal life it kind of happen. I don't know if it chose me so much, but I'd had some strange kind of experiences in the home that I grew up in, and shadows and whatnot. And I mean, and when I say that, it's just not all the time. I'm not out of my mind and stuff like that. I worked in years in corrections and pretty solid level-headed guy, but I have that other part that deals with paranormal investigations and research and folklore and all that. But I think it was one of those Batman origin stories. Everyone has it. Someone's a doctor, their mom or grandmother passed with something that they couldn't find a cure for. Or they had a loved one that had to deal with some issue like leg issues. They'll probably go into, prosthetics or something to help people out. And it was just one of those deals. But as of ever since I was a kid, if you could see inside my little studio, I've got like a Stephen King Silver Bullet poster, and I've got Trilogy of Terror with Karen Black, and I've got Kolchak and the original, The Count of Five, who was my original horror host as a kid out of Nashville, Tennessee. I'm about an hour 15 north of that, and it's just a plethora of oddball kind of strange stuff. Everything from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and up, and a little bit older than that. Some Vincent Price stuff, and so I've always had an interest in the movie element. I've always loved scary movies, especially classic horror and black and white. But it's a whole nother game when it's happening in your bedroom, it's happening in your living room, and you meet people, that's dealing with things like that. And that's sort of one of the reasons when I did do my books, like, I don't mean to plug, but like Hauntings of the Kentucky State Penitentiary, Hauntings of the Western Lunatic Asylum, and Hauntings of the St. Vincent's Academy, all these touched on people who were dealing with a negative element. There were some stories that were not particularly negative, but it definitely is going to be jarring when you have objects moving around, things moving about, knocks, you're getting bumped, if not worse. So I never forgot how scared I was as a kid. I would go to the public library, the George Kuhn Library here in Princeton, and I started reading. always heard what was the old adage, there's nothing to fear but fear itself and all that. So I started reading everything I could find on ghosts, Hans Hoser, guys like that. And once I kind of got what I feel was a grip on ghost, and when I say ghost, I'm doing that with air quotes. You can't see it, but I'm doing air quotes because I don't know for sure what it is. I'm not an expert. I don't think there really are experts. I think there's people who've done it a long time and know quite a bit about the phenomenon and some of the expected reactions and things like that. But I have no idea what a ghost is or what it is, where it's from. So, maybe one day I'll figure it all out. But I mean, I've been at this since I was a young teen and started doing like actual team research around probably 2005, 2006. Ghost hunters and stuff, it sparked everybody. So you had to run out and get matching T-shirts and caps and all that game. And as I got a little bit older, I kind of was like, well, keep it small, keep it simple. And, but it's still great and it's still fun to learn. And so, I'm pretty blessed.
So did you find, as a kid and having these experiences, did you have any difficulties in school as far as keeping and retaining friends? And, did people treat you kind of like you were weird or outcastish, or was it accepted?
I didn't say a lot about it. I come from, well, okay, real quick preface. My father had worked in the penitentiary systems for years in the 50s and the 60s. He was like an old John Wayne guy, don't cry, don't apologize, don't explain. And which him and my mom were both Depression era kids. They come up through all that going on. And but my mom's family was from the Appalachian Mountains, and so there was a lot of folk tales and all that kind of stuff, So when I went to school, like what you're hearing right now, which probably sounds as backwoodsy as possible, but I would call a window a Winderlight because it's a window and light comes through it. That was how backward kind of I was, which now I embrace it. But in school, you're already kind of I forgot the one guy from King of the Hill, the guy talks like this all the time, Boomhauer.
Yeah, Boomhauer.
I didn't want to be Ghost Boomhauer. I wanted to be. I was fine being Dan Aykroyd in Ghostbusters because he was excited and he was about it and he was knowledgeable. I'll take that. Maybe even Giles from Buffy. I will make a lot of movie references and television references, so I apologize. But school's tough enough without putting a target on your back. So I kept a lot of that quiet until I was a little bit older. I had a circle of friends that were hip, that I let in. I had a couple friends who experienced things with me. Not just in my home, but different places that we checked out, different experiments, And so I was a kind of a quiet kid. Think of Breakfast Club, kind of the Ali Sheedy character, mm-hmm. without the weird dandruff scene when she's shaking her hair and makes snow on a picture. I was okay. I was okay on that. I had good skin, but kind of quirky, quiet. So it took a long time, which also gravitated me toward like metal and punk rock, and because I was a musician for years, that's how it all started out. I did that. I did radio on the side. Once I started a family, of course, and the closest thing here that was a legitimate, like won't shut its door type job was law enforcement and the penitentiary, and so that's what I got into, and that's when it really opened up for me. I saw stuff inside the Kentucky State Penitentiary that I'd never seen before.
Yeah, and I'm really interested to hear about that. I really look up to law enforcement and our service men and women who are, taking care of our freedoms overseas. And I could just imagine some of the things that you may have come across working in a penitentiary or other places. Could you tell us a little bit about some of those experiences? Sure.
Well, it's so funny. I'm laughing because I have a younger friend who's just now went into work, is going through Common Core, as they call it, in training for the penitentiary. There was a couple books written, well, specifically by myself and a gentleman named Judge Bill Cunningham, and he'd written two books about the history and some of the family members that he had that worked there that went through some riots and stuff. Great books. And And they always would talk about that. Like, oh, if you're interested in learning a little bit about some of the history, go read Judge Cunningham's book. But now it's funny because there's gotten so much exposure about my book, which at first wasn't well received by a lot of the people at the pen, at least not the higher ups. Because who wants to, they're going to start getting calls. Was my son in a haunted prison? Get him out of there. But now it's sort of become, oh, well, you may want to check this out as well, because some of you guys work in the second floor. Yeah, working down in the infirmary. You might be hearing some stuff rattling. You may hear locks smacking and shadows. Go to chapter whatever. Mr. Asher covered this. So it's somehow I've became part of the lexicon and training, the training modules and stuff. It's weird. But the penitentiary was, I believe it was 1889, I think it come online, and on Christmas Eve. And it used to have this big plaque over the doorway. There was an archway under the prison where they would process the inmates, and there's an upper, like a top steps where the regular visitors and the staff come in. And it said, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. And that set the tone. It was about penance. It wasn't about coming in. It wasn't about sharing your feelings, dude. It's not, well, my dad didn't hug me enough. Okay, I'm not like a hardcore guy, but that was how it was. And it was brutal. You'd have kids in there for stealing apples or whatever, maybe in the wrong spot, the wrong time, the wrong color. Let's be real, this is Kentucky. And, in there with rapists and buggerers and arsonists and, Republicans. I'm kidding. I've got a lot of friends in Republicans. But,
yeah, me too. We
gotta know how it is.
We got to have a lot of different variety,
Well, that's the thing. I promise I won't get into politics other than saying, back in the day, like take something like Blazing Saddles and something. Everybody could joke. Everybody could pick and joke at each other. And, who knows where it's going to go. I think, though, when you have times of higher political strife, it's like, because you think about it, a lot of times you hear about ghosts, Civil War places, and World War II related locations. Wherever it seems like there's a lot of emotional. I don't think it has to be death. I don't think it has to be death at all, because in some of the institutions that I've been in and out of checking out, it's the same sort of thing. Anytime there's a heightened emotional state where there's uncertainty and things like that, just like in the penitentiary, it seems like it breeds it. And we live above what's known as a karst system. There's a lot of aquifers here and a lot of limestone. And I don't know how much you know about running water, but it produces a certain amount of current. And when that runs through, all that limestone, there's lots of quartz and limestone. Quartz goes into radios. All that stuff picks up frequencies. And every brick that was laid there was done by inmate labor. So it, in its own nature, you're literally digging your own grave or building your own cell. So there's a lot of just from the jump, a lot of really quirky and tragic stuff. A lot of deaths that didn't even necessarily have to do with like inmate on inmate crime or officer on inmate. Because you got to understand, a lot of these guys that come to work there were pretty rough and tumble guys. You kind of had to be. And sometimes things went bad real quick. The Kentucky State Penitentiary is the only supermax in Kentucky, and it sits on the Cumberland River. And there was the admin building. There was 1 and 2 cell house, which is now part of the admin building. 3 cell house, which is a seg. 6, which is got death row. 7 that has seg, and then there's like 4 or 5 that are kind of like what they call general inmates. They're not special protections guys. There is 1 floor on the 5th floor. I know I'll throw a lot of numbers at you, but that was the protective unit. Usually they were called grasshoppers because they wore green, and but all up and down through that place was just all kinds of stuff. But in 4 cell house, every building there used to be something else. It's just sort of like any state thing. They use it 6 or 7 ways before it's, done. It used to be the old death row. And back in the early days when they put plumbing in, like running plumbing, because remember, this is like early, they did not vent it properly. And a lot of people died due to methane exposure. And so, I mean, just there's like little things like that. Watermelon Row, which is not a David Lee Roth song. That's Tobacco Row. But Watermelon Row was a top tier of for sale house. This was one of these. It's like, think of getting like a big Scooby-Doo sandwich. You cut it in half and you open it up and you can see all the layers. There was 5 or 6 layers to the left, a main walk-up area, and then to the right, places that go up. There was prison side, which faces the yard, and river that faces, obviously, the river. On prison side, they had the area Watermelon Row, where if sometimes people got into a beef, they would more or less project someone off the top tier down to the heavy concrete kind of visiting area below. And the reason it was called Watermelon Row is because, as you can imagine, when their heads hit, it sounded like a watermelon, like a pop. It was pretty dark. And I'm sorry if I'm getting too gritty with it, but that's just the realities of it.
Yeah, no worries.
It was a pretty dark place. Yeah, it was a dark place. And, we still have the electric chair, old Sparky, and we also have lethal injection. I sat in Sparky. That was one of the things when I'd worked at a smaller penitentiary, and then I came there. And so I was kind of what they call a retread, like a tire. And they had us all go through there. And I said, well, who wants to sit in old Sparky, Some people was like, yeah, no. So I was, I'm scared, whatever. So I said, yeah, I'll sit in it. So I'm sitting there thinking about it. In a very clinical way of going, okay, well, they're going to tighten the bands across your chest, your wrist, and your legs. So I kind of like, put my wrist down against the thing and my back of my legs against it, and said, okay, they're gonna put the head thing on. You're just gonna tighten up. What are you gonna think about in those last, they row 1, row 2, and get ready to hit the final thing? And I'm like, I just think of like when I was a kid, like you had an older brother and I had 3. What do you do right before they knuckle up? They kind of flex on you. You tense up. You tense your body up. So that's what I did. And when I did, my hands gripped the grips, the arm rests. And I felt it was weird. I didn't understand. The bottom felt really strange. So anyway, when we were done, I got out and I looked up under there with my flashlight, and I saw these little half moons. And that was where these guys made a death grip when they were frying. And because there were these little black half moons, thousands of them. And I remember when we went to go eat after all that, I went to get my spoon and take a bite of some food. And I was like, man, what's wrong with this food? And so I smelled the plate. It was fine. I sniffed my hands. It was me. I'd got that charred smell. Yeah. Humans, lot like a burnt sweet ham. That's a burnt person's got a lot of the same elements, kind of a sweet smell. A soury sweet, once you burn sugar. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if anyone's interested, I am available for children's parties, and yeah,
sign me up.
So
my kids would love.
Well, you know what? Oh God, it's one of those things. I'm doing my best because, like I said, I do write a lot of books about paranormal and folklore and sci-fi, but me and my wife are also, because we do a lot with special needs children, are trying to write a children's book that I'm going to do the animation for, because I don't want to be. I'm trying to think. What was the movie? I think it was it Wayne's World, where they were touring the penitentiary, and there was one guy who said most tour guides won't tell you this, and he tells them about this horrific prison scene, and someone takes one of the inmates' eyes out and pees in his eye hole or something horrible, and I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be, it's like, I love this place. I love coming to the mountains. Who also love coming to the mountains? The Donner Party. Let me tell you a little story. I don't want to be that guy. But I'm so good. I naturally fall to that, and I really have to watch myself.
Well, I mean, all these stories, are so interesting, even though they are sometimes terribly wrong to some of us. It is interesting to hear these stories and to see different extremes that humans have to go through, and different things that you do have to do at times in order to survive, So, I mean, it can be dark, but it is a part of our history, really.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've never flinched from. Well, okay. I don't have a lot of deep personal religious beliefs, but I do believe this: that at the root of it, we are dualistic. meaning we can do wonderfully high-minded, benevolent, Hallmark Christmas movie type things, which my wife loves, by the way. But it's a thing of, we can also do some extremely gnarly, over the top, like, I didn't think there was a new way to kill somebody or torture somebody. Oh, but that guy figured it out. We excel at the brightest and the most dismal elements of the human spirit, and that's again, like you said, that's history, that's real, that's what was the old adage? Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it and whatnot. I think it's true, and I think before we think we're way so far ahead out of the food chain, we're not that far out of the cave, but we are out of the cave. You know what I'm saying? We are out of the cave. We're trying to do good things, but just, we always got to remember, we're still part of the animal kingdom, and I think that goes for souls too. I don't think that I think if you were, this is again, if a spirit is a spirit, that if you were a wonderful, grandma type that made popcorn balls and was the greatest, and everybody loved your chicken salad or whatever, you're still going to be that sweet kind of Aunt Bee type character. But if you're a real piece of work and just a horrific, dark creature, once you're free of a human form and you can go about and do whatever you want to, you can visit all kinds of evil on people. So, it's interesting because when you go to certain places, because like when I would check out the Western Lunatic Asylum, which is now called the Western State Hospital. That was the original name, because it was back in the days when terms like lunatic and moron and the R word and stuff was totally fine, because it was just terminal. It was part of the vernacular at the time. But the mentality was different. When I looked at the St. Vincent's Academy, which had a lot of special needs children and young adults, the spirit was different. And I use that in the most positive term, a curiosity, a innocence, a lot of little, voices going, stay, can we go home with you? Things like that. And it was, that was hard for me, emotionally, to know that there's some certain element of that person's, whatever it was, consciousness or whatnot, that seems stuck in that loop. And that really bugged me, having special needs kids, adopted and stuff. But it bothered me. It hit me on a personal level. And that's why when I would do this, I don't mean to talk so much about the books, but that's part of it.
Oh, no worries.
The penitentiary thing. Well, most people, when they would come to a signing, they would go talk about, I read this and that, and that one guy who, whatever, seemed like he was hanging, that was hung, and he was still stuck up and hung somewhere. He's a convict. I'm sure he did something horrible to somebody else. That's what he gets. Western State people were a little different, but it's like, well, man, they're crazy. They're crazy. They're crazy. They're in there for a reason. Whatever. But when you dealt with children, for me, it was. I took it to heart. I feel when I write about these books. I feel when I investigate places. I don't claim to be an empath, but I do have certain senses that I've developed, which I think we all have. Okay, I don't know. Do you investigate? Do you do anything like that?
Yeah, I started my own paranormal group, Four Corners Paranormal Investigations, in 2012.
Right on. So you get what I'm saying. And don't let me forget Four Corners, because I'm going to ask you some questions.
Okay.
Okay, let me give this for, as they would say in Ghostbusters, the straights. Everybody, let's say you are you having to go to the bathroom, it's down the hallway, whatever. Let's say you're at a friend's house. You don't really know the place, the lights are low. Most people are going to kind of have their hand out beside them so they don't bump into the furniture or something like that. I don't know why you'd have furniture in the hallway, but I digress. That's sort of a natural thing. We put our hands out. Our hands are part of our sensing, part of our senses. you know, and it's almost like when you wade into water, and there's sort of a heaviness to water, especially you get into deep water. It's sort of like that. I would notice changes in pressure. I know it sounds kooky. It's just almost like your uncle or your granddad going, "It's going to rain tonight, guys." Yeah, it's got a feeling in my knee. My knee starts getting wonky when it's very much like it. There is no science to it, and maybe there is, but I'm a very simple type of investigator, and when I would go into situations, it would feel kind of heavy, or the temperature changed really drastically, unexplainably. And I'd go, "Hey guys, do me a favor, take some pictures," because usually I'd be walking with a voice recorder or something. And a lot of times we would get weird shadows, plays of light, this and that. Sometimes balls of energy, not orbs, not a dust orb. That's a totally different animal. And I can hear the people going, "An orb is it?" Okay. I'm talking about like a plasma ball. And then once the feeling, the pressure, the coldness, whatever, dissipated, I'd ask to take pictures again, and it was gone. In the same location. I didn't move. They didn't move. So that was one of the weird things that, for whatever reason, that I've got, but I do got it. I'd learned a long time ago to trust your gut and a lot of stuff, because every single time I didn't, I got burnt on a situation, or got almost walked into a stabbing or something like that. Not at a haunting, thank God. But yeah, when you go, because my course of study was criminal justice. You go into a situation, say you're doing something out in the woods at an old farmhouse or whatever. You know, you put things out, you lay people out in grids, and you lay people out in teams, and you do. It's very much like you're trying to recover a lost person. You look at tracks. You're looking at things that are cryptids and whatnot. You know, reports of goat men or whatever. You lay it out just like you would do an investigation. There's no difference. You know what I mean? If you're looking for pretty solid evidence that you can kind of find correlation between times and this and that. But yeah, that's what I found works for me. But I tie it in with the old school stuff. I'll use dowsing rods, and I can hear people now like, "Wow, okay, dowsing rods."
I love them. Yeah, those were my first tools that I ever got. And my granny, because I was born and raised in Arkansas until I was about 7 or so, but she taught us how to douse with hickory stick. But the copper dowsing rods I used later on in life, and they're amazing.
Oh yeah, and like I told everybody, some people was like, well, you know, if you charge them and you kind of use whatever for whatever intent. I never do that. I just kind of go, I'm looking for a grave, or I'm looking for, an electrical thing, because a lot of times you would go across something they would cross, or if I go across somewhere and it's like it keeps crossing up, and they'll go, oh well, that was where the old well was. You have to kind of keep your mind focused on what you're looking for. You'll get cross-ups the whole time. But, I love them. And I've never had a battery go out on a dowsing rod.
Me neither.
You know what I'm saying? And that's what don't get me wrong. I'm not dogging pods and whatever, drone with night vision and whatever stuff. I'm sure they're there. But we've tried to pull it back to keep it very personal. I'm not one of those come at me bro kind of guys. I always go into whatever I'm doing out of respect for the family and the people living there, above all, and their safety. Finding the research, trying to get answers for them, and that's it. I really chafe when I see that, and you see guys, you know the type of people I'm talking about, and there's nothing wrong. I mean, if you want to go investigate something that's not connected to people, an old graveyard or whatever, abandoned place, do what you do. But I think agitating anything, first of all, is just bad form. I think that's just kind of coarse and vulgar. But
yeah, I agree.
Well, let me ask you this. As you'd mentioned, I do a podcast, House of Asher, and I actually I don't know, do you know who Jim Dandy is from Black Oak, Arkansas?
Yes, the name is familiar. I know I've heard the name, but I'm trying to think back to what the story is on that.
Okay, well, Jim Dandy is a musician from back in the day, like 70s guy, big guy. Had songs like, good Lord, let me think. What was his big songs? Probably the biggest songs like Jim Dandy, The Rescue, Sting Me, things like that. Well, I actually had him on the show not long ago. Took forever.
Awesome.
It's like pulling rhinoceros teeth or something. Which I don't even know if they got teeth. That's how hard they are to find, right? But so yeah, I've been very lucky to pull in people, not just from this and that. I've been able to reach out to writers. I've been able to reach out to professors of like sleep paralysis. I've been able to. Do you remember Diane Franklin from like the second Amityville horror movie? She was in like American Virgin and all that. Had her on. Okay, I'm not trying to do a spill about my show, but what I'm saying is,
oh, no worries.
I'm sure what you kind of want to do too is like, when I do my stuff, it's my show is more entertainment, but it does touch on the paranormal. It does touch on spooky subjects, and it does touch on, I just did a show about the Area 51 fiasco, right? And but it's one of those deals. All that's part of it, and all that's an extension of who I am as a fan, because I come to this as a fan, still am. And but let me ask you, Four Corners area. Are you familiar with I think it was called Monticello, has a gigantic plant there.
Yes, I've been to Monticello. That's more up north.
Right, that's like going toward like Albuquerque in that area, right?
Okay, yeah.
Me and my brothers, I had two brothers, and they were like steel mill guys. I mean, cue the like flash dance music or something. Like back in the day, there was these crazy, jacked, guys just doing all this work, going from state to state to state. And we went to South Carolina and stuff. And I was lucky enough to come up here on some field jobs, and I got to speak to some of the native people there, and I was like, tell me about this and that. I didn't get too much into skinwalkers because that's no bueno. They don't like that. But they would talk a whole lot about different little things, chupacabra, and different types of old wives' tales. And so I've always loved that area. I've always loved that part of like down in Texas and all through there. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I love the area that I live in. Well, I grew up in when we moved to Colorado, I went to school and graduated there. Then I joined the Marine Corps, and then came back for recruiter's assistance, and then back to North Carolina, South Carolina, and got an honorable medical discharge. Went back to Arkansas, then Tennessee, and then back out here to Colorado. I just love it out here so much. It's just so diverse.
Well, I was going to say, too, thank you for your service. I appreciate that. And God bless you.
Well, thank you as well for your service.
Well, it's the thing. I was never a military person. There's dicey stuff. I mean, I've never had to worry about, IEDs and things like that. Thank God. But I was going to ask you, and I'm sure this is the first thing anyone says if they hear you're from Colorado, like, how far are you from the Stanley, the big Stanley Hotel?
Oh, I would say probably about, I want to say 7 or 8 hours.
Okay. But in Colorado, that's like, well, that's just, that's not crazy. Like here, if the closest bigger towns, because like I said, I live in Princeton, Kentucky. Everybody's out, come and visit me. You've got like Nashville, it's like an hour 15. St. Louis is almost 3 hours. Chicago is a good 6 or 7. So we get it. Most people that live like metro, 15 minutes from here and there, they're like, oh my God, how do you trap? Because you got to do it. That's the nature of it. But that open space gives you a little anonymity, and people appreciate their freedoms out there, and they're very protective of them. And it's kind of like it is in the South. The South gets, not completely unjustly labeled certain things, and we have goofball, wackadoo, racist, this and that and stuff. But overall, people are just people, and they're just wanting to raise their kids, and they're soccer moms, and they're, the things that's everywhere else. It's just, we do it a little slower with a little accent and with some sweet tea,
Oh, yeah.
That's all. Oh, yeah. But, so what else you got to ask me? I kind of felt like I took over the show. I apologize.
Oh, no worries. You're the guest, so the show's all about you and what you'd like to talk about. But I'm kind of, my grandpa, he's originally from Kentucky, and he was more of a serious guy. He didn't talk a lot about, ghost happenings and stuff that had happened in the past to the family and everything. But I'm curious to see, if there are any similarities between Arkansas and Kentucky. I've seen full body apparitions. I've seen ball lightning, which to me, I'm not sure if it's supernatural, paranormal, because this thing was intelligent. The one that I had seen. So I'm just curious what sort of different things you guys got going on up there. I know I had a run-in with some, I used to call them kobolds because a lady that I talked to, she had a run-in with them as well. And that's what she called them. I always just, said they look kind of like the gremlins with the big ears and the slick skin, but the ears were a little smaller than that. And when I looked online, kobolds didn't cover it at all. Those looked more like, little people. To me, they look more like the Kentucky Goblin. Have you known anybody who has witnessed that or experienced that?
Now, it's funny you talk about little people and things like that. What people have to understand, Disney really, really did like kind of a disservice to these type of creatures, because some of them were very, very intelligent and very, very powerful, and there were some that were really evil. In a book of short stories I've got coming up, I talk about kind of like a Goblin King, and people really feared them. You go to certain spots of like Scots area or Irish areas, and they still are very much that way. I mean, that whole knock on wood come from the old belief of, you knock on wood, to not appease, or to not anger something, but also sometimes they would grant you good luck. And there's so much what people would consider superstition that is with us right now today. You go to, like you said, out west, you're going to see places with horseshoes and stuff turned up and whatnot. But as of seeing kobolds, I have not myself, but we have an area here called Land Between the Lakes. It was, I think JFK had it annexed, and I'm talking there was probably 40 or 50 communities in there, and they were forced off their land, and it was one of those type of deals. And they turned it into a nature preserve, and they dammed up the water and made the Cumberland River and the Barkley Dam to provide hydroelectric power here in Western Kentucky. Well, but even before then, this area was kind of remote, and people would talk of, if you check out Beast of LBL, you'll learn about a story that happened a while back, and this is documented stuff of some families that went camping. And this is one of those stories of like, he's like, "How you liking the camping, kid? Let me tell you a story." But this is pretty dark. There was a family went out. They had like a decent camper, and no one had heard from them for a while. And they had went out and checked out the area, and they could find where they kind of drove off down into the wooded area a little bit off the road. The camper, like I said, it was one of those like silver ones, real pretty sturdy. One side was peeled back like a sardine can. The mother and the daughter were, they were dead. The father was there as well. No one could find him. And then it was like, how sometimes law enforcement is. If a mother dies or a child dies, it's got to be the dad. Or if the dad dies and the child, it's got to be the mother. It's usually someone close to you who kills you, unfortunately. So they're looking around for this guy. Well, they go back probably 50, 60 feet. Probably more like 200 feet in. But then someone starts, for whatever reason, looking up because they're hearing the sound of something. And they look up there, and there's a big sleeping bag kind of half wrapped around the top of a big tree, where something had went up there and was working on the dad. And, more or less it was a thing that they got tipped off by the buzzers that was circling. But anyway, they got him down. And when I say parts of the dad, a lot of them was consumed. And this is something that's not talked about. You mentioned your granddad. It's still like that. You know how it is. I'm sure you've heard it 100 times. Well, let sleeping dogs lie. Well, honey, that's just things that we don't talk about. That's that old thing of something's horrible. Let's not talk about it. Let's not think about it. Put your head in the sand and pretend it's not happening. But yeah, that was a big thing. And people still talk about seeing Bigfoot, kind of a dogman type character. I've even had people refer to reptilian type stuff, which could be kind of koboldish. I'm not sure how tall they were, but they were like in cave systems and stuff like that, because we have a lot of caves, because we're connected with, I'm sure you're familiar with Mammoth Cave.
Mm-hmm.
And that runs all the way down through, and the last fingers of it in here in Western Kentucky. And I actually live, I probably shouldn't give the information, but I live on a street called Cave Street. And there's like literally caves within 1,000 feet of me.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it's pretty interesting. And I've gotten so many different stories just from my small town of Princeton, where there was a Big Springs and has a big cave of people talking about it, saying they saw things under there, giant bird type things, which could be a herring or a heron or whatever you want to call it, big stork type birds, whatever, but which we have some of those around, but generally not up in the caves. So even if they're a little bit of embellishment or a little bit of, like a fish story, the guy got like a 4-inch fish, but by the time he got it home, that sucker was a 2.5 foot long and had legs and was fighting them, but it's enough people reporting the same thing, the same basic design, the same basic behaviors, the same basic location, squawks like a duck, walks like a duck, right? So, but yeah, there's a bunch of that here. And I'm doing a book on the counties where I'm breaking it down into part 1 and part 2. We have giant skeletons that have been found in Adair County. The Kelly Goblin, Geraldine Stith, who is the woman who'd written books on that. She's a grandchild of the Suttons. I actually know the Suttons, and she actually was really very integral in me writing my first book, because I'm not a writer by vocation. I would write songs and things like that, but it's a different game, and you have to put down all your thoughts into a cohesive, coherent, readable product. And but yeah, and because I'd asked her, and I said, I'm not going to ask you if it happened, because I don't think you'd be telling the story if it didn't, because I guarantee you're not making enough to make it worth your time. But they have something called the Kelly Green Man Days, and and as a remembrance of that, which I think is a big leap, because when it first happened, they swore up and down that they were just a bunch of crazy hillbillies and dipping into too much of their own shine and whatnot. And we tend to want to attack the victim on stuff, and I'm sure there's people that's had false stories, but their story never changed. And all the time, the story never changed. So, kind of lend some credence to what they say. But I've seen apparitions. I've seen like a handful of full-bodied ones. The scariest one I ever seen, I was in LBL, which is a wonderful place to vacation, and also it's a good place to investigate. We had if you read about like floods of like 1913 and 1930s, every 25, 35 years we'll have we used to would have bad floods in this part of the world. Anyway, or this part of the U.S., sorry. And inadvertently you would have kids develop scarlet fever and Spanish flu, just because, the sickness, stagnated water, dysentery, and it killed swaths of children. And we would go to some graveyards, and we would investigate like these children graveyards. Now, my wife, her gift, and this might be true of a lot of women that have had kids, and that we've lost children in the past. Mm-hmm. But she could really connect with what I would call children's spirits, and because she would kind of talk to them just like, hey honey, how you doing? Very not, how are you talking to this? She's a very nurturing type. And she always got very good responses from that. And we were in a graveyard, but that was a children's graveyard. But I was getting this a really heavy feeling in this one part of the toward the outer edge on the unhallowed ground. And so I'm walking over there and trying to do some recordings, and somebody said something, or I thought somebody said something to my left, and I kind of looked up and glanced and got the heck scared out of me. I saw a real pale yellowish looking, almost like a semi-dried looking form, almost like they were half mummified, with its neck twisted and bent down, like its head was kind of pushed in, like it was kind of under its shoulder blades, but its head was twisted forward. It was the damnedest thing.
Oh, wow.
And oh, it scared me. I mean, this, I'd already worked in prison systems and dealt with all that. That scared me. And I'm like, oh God, I jumped, because I thought, I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe somebody slipped in the graveyard on us, and some sort of crazy person or drug addict or something. So I'm like, guys, and they come over and they're flashing around. I was like, man, flash your lights all up along the tree line. It's nothing. And it took me a while to tell them. And we did get some weird audio and it was like this, a voice of this guy cussing us, telling us to get out. And that was pretty heavy. I mean, we've had a lot of interesting stuff like that, having big box fans come up off the floor and fly past you and strike the wall and stuff like that. That's not every day, though, thank God. A lot of times it was just, oh, well, this is why your floor is rattling. Oh, well, this is what's going on with your shelves coming off the wall or whatever, But every so often you'll get into something, and it's dark and it's unnerving, and especially in EVPs. I was doing, if I don't know how much time we have before we have to go to break, but I was investigating a house where they were doing a lot of candle magic and Ouija boards and stuff, which I know some people, guys like Tim Shaw, guys like that, who are multi-generational spiritualists and occultists. They've done this their whole lives. This is like teaching your kid to swim to them. So they know how to do it properly. Anyway, these folks were playing around with it, and they started calling up stuff that they didn't know how to stop. They didn't know how to close the circle out. And they drew something. And they would have their vents, and they would see black, almost like, you ever seen like seaweed under the water? How it kind of moves in the water, almost like fingers. They'd see stuff like that going up the wall. They would have shadows darting back and forth across the tops of the walls and down to door facings. It's just really freaky. To the point that they contacted me. It's one, that classic, we're sleeping all in the living room. We keep all the lights on. I mean, they were at the point of, they weren't super religious, but they were like playing like church music and stuff. It was pretty wacky. And they had me come in, and I had come in with some consecrated oil and, said the Lord's Prayer and all that. And which, this is early on. I was a little bit more religious at the time. But so I went through and I did all the rooms, and it wasn't too bad. Not a whole lot of strange. And so I went to their bathroom, which apparently was where they were doing a lot of the magic stuff, setting the board up on the sink in the bathroom. Well, I go to this room, lights are out, and I go to the door frame. I cannot break into the room. I cannot step over the threshold. I'm not saying like I'm hitting the glass wall like a mime. I'm talking, my leg won't lift. I can't put my hands to the door. I feel in the closest thing it felt like it was almost like I was trying to put my body into a wood chipper. That was the visceral response I got of going, heck no. So we had already set up a voice recorder in the room, and I'm trying to say the Lord's Prayer. And then like the last part, it's like in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Ghost. Amen. So I'm fumbling on the words. I can't think of the prayer for a minute. It's like I was struck dumb by whatever. And I'm not saying it was a demon, because it's just like, it's the aliens, guys. I'm not saying it's an alien, but it's aliens. I'm not saying that. But I couldn't explain it. But then I finally kind of was able to get it out. And you kind of heard like a scratching going on during while I was saying it. And then in the last part, when I would say in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, it repeated it back to me. But it didn't repeat it back to me like, cool, I didn't hear it. But my body registered it, because I would go, you've seen The Exorcist, right?
Yes.
I'm sure. And, where, like the girl says, it's a lovely day for an exorcism, don't you think? That kind of voice like that. Like that. And I was like, in the name of the Father, and I would say, Father. And I'd say, and of the Son, and it would go, the Son. Like kind of making fun of it. And then when I said, amen, I couldn't get, when I was saying amen, something come across like, oh, Lord. I can't really verbalize it. It was so deep. Mm-hmm. And it was like all these mixed up voices and squeaks and it's the scariest damn thing. And like I said, I really have never been scared in an investigation. And so my wife, God bless her, is wanting to come past me to get the recorder because it was the last room. And I kind of stop her, and she goes, "Go around." And I literally kind of, grab her shoulders. Not grab her shoulders. Like, listen here, you. But it's like, look, no, just give it a minute. And they're taking pictures, and like my eyes are big as saucers. It's like, do you remember like when you were small and you did something really dopey and broke something of whatever, or like wait till your dad gets home?
Right. No, don't tell Dad.
I was like, oh God, and just like that dread. It was like being called to the principal's office.
Yeah.
It's the same sort of expression, and I was like, oh God, this is really bad. And so when we played it back, I was like, that's what I was feeling, because I was like, what the heck's wrong with me? This is what I do. This is my jams, But this is super weird. And but we got it cleared out. It seemed everything was fine. But unfortunately, and I think you may find this too, when we got a call maybe a month or two later, and they said, oh well, hey, things are going on now. Because I said, look, are you guys particularly religious? And they said, well, we were raised Baptist, whatever. So okay, fine. Get, maybe read a chapter of something. Maybe put up a few crosses and
no dancing.
Leave that.
No dancing.
No dance. No, it's Footloose. A Footloose Paranormal edition. No. But just it was just one of those things. I'm thinking, well, look, if you're going anywhere near this, it's going to cause you to have a problem. Excuse me, I was getting a sip of coffee. But it was a thing. It started happening again, and they confessed that they, it's like, well, things calmed down, and I think we learned, and we could kind of said, look, you, for whatever reason, you guys suck at this. You need to not, just not do it there. And I had to just leave it alone because they wouldn't leave it alone. The family eventually moved out, and I know the new family that moved in, and they haven't had any problems, but they're also not, drawing pentacles in the freaking ground and, what I'm saying, sprinkling brake dust everywhere and throwing chicken bones, just
you're just like, just stop that. Don't do that. Just stop that.
Yeah, I mean, or at least get well read on it.
Right. Educate yourself.
Yeah, as we'd say here, educate yourself. We're not gonna. I'm not gonna give a 4-year-old a shotgun and send him off in the woods. That's kind of what you're doing. If you're playing with stuff, especially if it's something dark, and if you believe in whatever of timeless, bodiless entities that never had form, these things are ancient, and I'm pretty sure it's like, are you smarter than a 5th grader? Are you smarter than an interdimensional demon? I don't know.
No, I'm not. I'm not smarter than a 5th grader. I know that. Not sure about the interdimensional demon. I'm sure it knows a lot of things I don't.
Well, and understand, please don't take, when I say demon, I'm not necessarily even talking about something biblical. There's just ageless things. I mean, Jesus, read a Lovecraft book. Don't read Latin out loud. If you don't know what it says, don't read it. It sounds like I'm joking, but I'm not.
Right.
So, but yeah. There's sometimes we kind of make our own misery sometimes with stuff like that.
For sure. And sometimes, like you said, an edumacation is hard to find, especially back east and in other parts. In the hills. I had an edumacation in the hills for a little bit, and that was interesting.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the great thing. Western Kentucky, which is where I am at, is sort of like, all right, think about it like this. Which, don't get me wrong, there's not everybody's walking around in overalls and all that in Eastern Kentucky and all that. There's a lot of very modern things there. But historically, it's been a very poor coal mining area, hard living, hard fighting, hard dying folks. Western Kentucky is similar, but it's not quite as hilly. It's a lot more farmer related. There's a lot of coal here, but it's not in that golden triangle of Lexington, Louisville, Frankfort, Kentucky, which is the power seat. And so we're kind of there was an old term back in the day, redheaded stepchild. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
Oh yeah.
But But
I used
and
to
there
be
it
threatened
is.
to be beat like one, so yeah, I've heard that term.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know who that kid was that got that original beating, but it must have been bad.
Yeah. Well, on
But,
that note, we do have to go to break, and we'll be back shortly with Steve E. Asher. And we are promoting music for our commercial breaks. And for our next 2 breaks, we'll be hearing from Prime Example, which is our listeners know Quest. He's been in the chat room before. That's his band, as well as Mystique. All right, so you guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this.
Spark so much fire, think I woke up the dragons. I'm the new beast, spitting apocalypse for a fantastic. Got the power from God, made the rest hard to breathe. I'm on the surface, flow so powerful, industry don't fit me. Spark so much fire, think I woke up the dragons. I'm a new beast, spitting apocalypse for a fantastic. get relief when it happens and show that I don't play dough. Stepping to us will be so fatal. Spark so much fire. Think I woke up the dragons. I'm the new beast, spitting apocalypse for a fantastic. Got the power from God, made the rest hard to breathe. I'm on the surface, flow so powerful, industry don't fit me. Spark so much fire. Think I woke up the dragons. I'm a new beast, spitting apocalypse for a fantastic. Got the power from God, made the rest hard to breathe. I'm on the surface, flow so powerful, industry don't fit me.
Hey, it's swag. I done got back in my bag. I done had people laugh. I done seen people pass. I spaz like spaz. The garbage man and they trash. This of course I can't crash. This a race and I'm fast. I pass the fate and put all of it last. Dragon so I clash. I hide it all in the stash. We are diamonds, they are brass. I'm connected with no lag. She a spin 34 bag. That's my wife and I'm glad. Michael Myers with his stabs. Ali with his jabs. A scientist in the lab. JJY in his past. The amigos with the dab. This is why I rap. And I got the nag. Spazzy roll the sack with Mystique in the back. Money tall like Shaq. Weapons like Iraq. I am cancer in a pack. The 9/11 attack. We don't know no slag. You can't hold us back. Rock and roll with that.
So much fire. Think I woke up the dragons. I'm the new beast, spitting apocalypse for a fantastic. Got the power from God, made the rest hard to breathe. I'm on the surface, flow so powerful, industry don't fit me. Spark so much fire. Think I woke up the dragons. I'm a new beast, spitting apocalypse for a fantastic. Got the power from God, made the rest hard to breathe. I'm on the surface, flow so powerful, industry don't fit me. Do you believe? Are you ready? It's time for school. Roll out your red carpet. You gotta love to learn and have fun. It's time for school.
Do you believe? Are you ready? Yeah, ready. It's time for school. Roll out your red carpet. You got to love to learn and have fun. It's time for school.
The funniest memory that I could recall is getting up to sharpen my pencil as a kid, showing off my new outfit from head to toe. Yo, I love the life of 3 9-year-olds with hyper goals. My mind be blown. Don't get upset when the answer's wrong. Pray for strength and you'll survive to be strong. I am a teacher, is how I define myself. Help me vibe so well. Don't stress, do your best and forget the rest. Mama made sure we pray to God, highly blessed, and I am honored. No weapon formed against us should prosper. Don't ever forget. And I bet when you enter into school, you'll feel ultimate. No consequences of your accomplishments. Move away from the negativity, it got you bit. And if you getting in the midst, just take the time and repent. Stay focused, get a pencil, write about the lesson. Raise your righteous hand, find the answer to questions. Could be your main plan, leave a saucy impression. You are your own fan, you got this, is what I recommend. Do you believe? Are you ready? It's time for school. Roll out your red carpet. You gotta love to learn and have fun. It's time for school.
Do you believe? Are you ready? It's time for school. Roll out your red carpet. You got to love to learn and have fun. It's time for school. Back then, I loved school. I was cool. I was putting in my dues. I ain't wanna be no fool. My Mama had it poppin', school supplies and shopping. Success was an option, man. Had me locked in, but English was my topic. Lunchtime I had it rocking, lunch tables was knocking, and we wasn't stopping. In gym, I was good from the 3, like Stockton. Music class, I had everyone stuck. They was watching, we wore Jabot straps with retros and the watches. Love life, humble yourself, that's my creed. Think with your mind and heart, you will achieve. Pray on it, give it to God and proceed. Your goals, ambition, and God is all you need. Imagination and will is something we can't teach. Remember Dr. King, he had a whole dream. You can do whatever you want. I believe.
Do you believe? Do you believe? Are you ready? Are you ready? It's time for school. Roll out your red carpet. You gotta love to learn and have fun. It's time for school.
Do you believe? Are you ready? It's time for school. Roll out your red carpet. You got to love to learn and have fun. It's time for school.
Do you believe? Are you ready? It's time for school. Roll out your red carpet. Yeah, you gotta learn to love to have fun. It's time for school. Roll out your red carpet. Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome back and thanks so much for listening tonight. What you just heard was a song from Prime Example, and that was followed by 2 songs by Mystique from Milwaukee. So thanks so much for listening to our guest, Stevie Asher. Steve, welcome back and thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Absolutely. Like I said, I'm having fun.
Me too. I know people get kind of nervous about coming on and about being interviewed, but I think of it more as just hanging out and talking about stuff and not really picking people apart. So I really enjoy what I do, and I love hanging out with people and getting to know them and making new friends in the paranormal field.
You know, I'm exactly the same way on it. I'm too weird to be that professional. I mean, don't get me wrong. You know, when I try to do stuff, I try to not come in just totally off the wall, but because like I said, this is me trying to be normal. Okay. So, but it's just one of those things where if I want to, I'm not trying to be on 2020 or 60 Minutes or whatever shows that probably don't even exist anymore. But yeah. To me, it's about having fun and getting up the story that goes with, okay, well, why did you do this, or why you have an interest, or okay, well, tell me something that's sort of a sidebar to that, that explains a little bit more about who I'm talking to. Yeah, I mean, that's the great part of it, and the thing is now, like with stuff like Stitcher and things like that, it's just easy to do, because before I would have had to look at sitting down in a physical station, and being this is sort of a Bible Belt area, people are very slow to dealing with paranormal things and whatnot. So, it affords us the opportunity to do that, so it's pretty cool. But, yeah, I was curious. Well, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I knew that you had a lot of experiences as a kid and all that, but was there like somebody, like for me, like in the early mid 90s, I was actually working in a wall stand at a penitentiary, and there's a lot of corn, back off behind the fences, and I'm sitting there, and it's I don't know if it's a full moon. It was bright enough it illuminated the fog that slowly rolled in. And what happens is when you're in a wall stand, it rolls across the ground, and it looks like you're sitting on top of clouds. And which we didn't tell the inmates that, but you can't see a lot of the yard, so you're kind of up there by yourself. And luckily, the penitentiary that I worked at allowed you to have small transistor radios, because they knew if you didn't have any sound, you're going to fall asleep. Because I worked midnights. Primarily, I love midnights. So, and here comes Art Bell, and I think it was like Father Malachi Martin, or they were talking about the, what was her name? And, the girl they did the movie about, like the Emily Rose movie. You know, Angelise Rose something. I think she was French, and she was possessed. And I don't know where I come in on it, and you could hear him going, you're talking this creepy. Not that the language is creepy, but the way she was doing it was really creepy. And I'm thinking, what in the world is this? Which it kept me awake, obviously, all night. It scared the kind of crap out of me. I'm looking over my shoulders and stuff. But it pulled me in. And there was a power there. It was like the theater of the mind. And I loved that. And, even between my stints on radio, I've always wanted to do something like that. And that's what kind of pulled me in. Was there an individual kind of like that for you? Or did you just naturally just say, well, I'm going to do this one day, and so you did?
Well, I had all kinds of experiences. First one that I remembered was the ball of fire, which people call ball lightning, but it smacked down on the porch and then came up through the center of the living room, which we were all sitting in there and talking and telling ghost stories and such, because the power had gone out. But this ball comes up, and then it goes into the dining room area, which is connected to the kitchen, and then shoots down the hall towards where my brother just came out of the laundry room. He grabbed the clothes so they wouldn't wrinkle, and my mom could hang them up throughout the house or whatnot. But it shot down towards him and out the brick wall. About a week before my mom had a car accident, I saw my first full-body apparition, and I've always had issues sleeping, I think because of paranormal experiences I had and just waiting for something to happen. So I was always the last to be asleep, and this particular night I'm just staring out the door into the hallway, and we had one of those cool old like beer clocks that had a river running on it, and the light was just kind of bouncing in between the walls of the hall, and all of a sudden I hear these footsteps, and it sounds like a woman walking in high heels, and I'm thinking, okay, did I blink? And when I blinked, my mom went past the doorway, like, what's happening? And so I called out for her a couple times, and the third time I called out Mom, and right as I did, she came into the doorway, and she was wearing period clothing as far as, like, in the 1800s. It was a long black lace dress, and she had a black veil over her face and these 1800 period shoes. And as she got to the middle of my doorway, she stopped and slowly turned and looked at me, and then slowly turned and looked back down the hall and kept walking. And then I heard her go into my mom's room and close the door, and then I didn't hear or see her any time after that. But that really Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean what you're saying. I was just, of course, I go into researcher mode. Was she solid? Did she cast any sort of shadow? Was she, half there, half there? I mean, what was her corporeality, if that's a word?
She appeared to be a real person, but she was about 2 inches off the ground.
No, that's not good.
Yeah.
Floating is never good.
Yeah. And still
you just brought it a whole new level, yeah.
Yeah, and still making the noise on the floor. So maybe it's her energy or whatever. I don't know. So that really piqued my interest. Our family got split up after my mom was killed, and my older siblings went with their parents, and I went with my dad, and we got back together later on, and we were all sharing stories. And when I was at my grandparents', I experienced the little Kentucky goblins or whatever the heck they were, and I believe I actually saw the devil in the same room that my mother did. And at this reunion that I'm talking about, my dad had brought that to my attention. Like, when I told my story, he turned as white as a sheet, and then he's like, your mom had the very same experience, but instead of being in the doorway, he was right by her bed, and they actually carried on a conversation.
Yeah.
But my sister had seen the same woman in her room that I'm talking about in the black dress, and she was listening to her Michael Jackson Thriller record, and she turned around, and this woman is standing in her room, and she's like, who are you? What are you doing here? And she had told her, close the window. the last time she said close the window, she was very stern and kind of sounded somewhat angry. So she turned around, closed and locked the window, and turned back around, and the lady was gone. And she told my mom about it, and they went out and investigated the next day, and there were footprints out there. We lived right off a bend of a little highway there in Siloam Springs, Arkansas, and at the time, and so that was interesting. But my mom was very spiritual, and we had a lot of paranormal experiences, all of us, on our own throughout the years. And like I said on break to you, like I had issues in school as far as making friends and feeling normal because everybody treated me like I was the weirdo, all these things that I would share with them, thinking it's normal because in my family it is. But to them, like, stay away from her, she's the weird girl. So I stayed in what I call the paranormal closet until about 2012, and that's when a friend of my daughter's, Dylan Redwine, went missing, and, I had just gave birth to my son a month before, and I'm just thinking about him, hoping he's okay, and wanting to help that mother in any way I could. So myself and a couple friends of mine started Four Corners Paranormal and investigating that way, and it's just grown year after year, and we're helping people in our community, and we don't charge. I feel like if we did, we'd be taking advantage because there's really not a lot of help out there for these things, But that's what got me into it and interested.
Well, let me ask you this then, because like I said, I kind of make these little, little mental Post-it notes of going, okay, I want to ask her about that. So do you feel that whatever that image or visual that of the woman saying close the window, was that something that was trying to protect you? I thought you were going to say, come to find out that there was a woman who threw herself out the window or something come in through the window and killed her at night or something like that. But you're thinking maybe it was saying close the window, there's somebody creeping around your house.
Yeah, for the longest time I thought, this entity or whatever the heck it is had something to do with my mom's death because, like I said, she ended up being killed by a drunk driver like a week later. So I thought there was a connection there and that this person was not a good person. But then later on when I heard the story from my sister, I was like, she was trying to protect us. I think she was a protector, and I don't know if she's related to us or she just came with the house or what. But right after my mom died, my dad didn't want to live there, so we sold the house and moved to Fayetteville, Arkansas, and tried to carry on life there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I get it. When our one of our sons, the little boy we had to go get in Thailand, had died of a seizure about 4 years ago here at the house, and I understand that wanting to go because everything you see, everything you touch, every smell in the house makes you think of them. And why wouldn't it? Especially if, we had him here for 7 years, and that was, over half of his life. We got him when he was 7, going on 8. And it's a knee-jerk reaction of getting away. I've never quite understood. I think it's a kind of a Western, in regards of, Western portion of the world of like, okay, I love this person. Don't go, Grandma. She's dead. Okay, she's a corpse now. Get away from her. And I'm not saying this like, that you can go too far. You can be like the guy in Psycho keeps his mom in a chair in the attic. That's not what I'm saying. But, a lot of cultures treat and have the connections with their dead differently, because the thing is, it doesn't matter where you go, you're still going to have that connection with the locality. Maybe if they died on the property or it was a really savage type situation, they were murdered or something. But I think it's people that are haunted, not houses. I think what you're open to and where your mind is. I'll tell you one thing. I had a friend of mine when we were kids. This is in the like 80s. And do you remember like the Hellraiser movies, right? Mm-hmm. All right. I think it was the first movie, and it had this weird box turning, and it had a guy's face, and he said like Jesus wept. It was just kind of a weird scene. Clive Barker's kind of a weird guy. He does a lot of weird stuff in his films and his books. Also did Nightbreed, which I love. But anyway, had a friend staying over. We were in early teens. And we watched it movie. It kind of scared him. And I kept kind of picking at him going, Jesus wept, ha, 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 like a spooky voice.
Yeah.
And he's like, man, You know how it is. And it's like, man, shut up. You know what scared me, dude? And I said, it's just a movie. I can't believe you freaked out by that. And I kept kind of, he was my buddy, but it was just, you know, I was ribbing him. And, well, we're sitting there. We lived in county, out in the county here in Caldwell. And other than like a street light or two down good ways from our house, it gets dark. There, you know, lights go out. It's country dark. And people who aren't from the city don't quite get it unless they go into a blackout situation. And that's like, yep, welcome to the country. Doesn't matter if you're in the middle of the downtown. If you can't see, you're in the country. And my doorway, I had a doorway, obviously, to the room, and the door was open. And it was black. You know, it was. But then the room started getting really cool. And just the pressure of the room changed. And I'm not saying you could see your breath, but just like it was cool enough you felt like you should be able to see your breath.
Right.
And my friend Mike said, man, what's – and I said, is it cold in here to you? He said, yeah, it's freezing. What's going on? Because we didn't have air conditioning then. You know, we had like a fan in the window. This is like late – about now. It's maybe – low 70s, early 60s, but it felt like it was in the 30s. It was freezing. Well, I glanced over. Something caught my eye. I saw movement. I didn't know if I thought it was my mom coming through, and I saw. You ever heard somebody talk about something blacker than black?
Yeah, I've seen.
Right,
individual
and
like that.
It's immediate, and it's. I use the term visceral, but it's again, but it's what it is. It's primal. It's the that ain't right. Whatever that is, that ain't grandma, that ain't mama, that ain't pops, that ain't your Uncle Larry. That's something really off. This thing was, my doorway was probably a 7 foot or so tall doorway. The thing's head reached the top of it. It almost looked like somebody. Like almost like a cloaked, like a hooded individual, like think of a monk. And the room felt like, okay, you ever had your hand up against a vacuum or the back of a fan, and you could feel it sucking like the air between your fingers, and like and you felt like you're drawing the heat out of the room. Is what it felt like. It was strange. I've not experienced that very often, but it was very intense. And I went, oh my God, dude. And he's like, oh God, what is that? I'm like, I don't know. We can't get out through the window because it's on the other side of the room. We can't run past it the doorway because it's in the doorway. Once it notices that we notice it, it starts moving in. And also, like you mentioned before, it's not walking. It's floating through the air. Scared me to death. Okay. This is how I was wired. When it went down, we had a, like the lights in the middle of the room, you pull the pull cord back in the old-timey houses?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's got the ceramic one bulb in the room, and you got to be out toward the middle of the room to pull the cord.
Yeah, you got to go into the middle of the room in the dark just to get to it.
Uh-huh. Right. And I was about 3 or 4 foot from it. Well, my mind went to pull that, and I don't know if it got what I was doing, and it started going like close, not making a sound like but like it was like toward me. My friend's trying to go through the wall. He's like freaking out, going at the wall, trying to crawl on the bed, anything. And I'm like, I have to get this light on. Something in my head tells me, if you don't get this light on, you're dead. I don't know what it was. I get up on the edge of the bed, which is stupid because I'm not brave. I'm not saying I'm a brave guy. I got up, and I'm trying to reach for it, and it's like the cord looks like it's moving, like rocking, and I'm trying to grab for it. It's just out of my reach. And I laugh because it's so funny what I did. Do you remember that children's song, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so?
Uh-huh.
I start singing it. I start bellowing it. And thinking it would stop it. It gets faster. Then it's really mad. Somehow I'm able to grab that. I jerk it. I fall back onto the bed, throw the covers over both our heads, and we're sitting there, we're shaking. We're like this. I was like, oh my God. Oh my. And I was like, shut up, man. I can't hear it. Shut up. And we're waiting. And we probably wait there 2 or 3 minutes. And then I finally kind of, do like where you can get one eye out from under the covers. And I look around and the room is clear. Which, it took a minute for the pressure to go. But then once the pressure went and the temperature kind of changed, I peeked out from the covers. And everything was fine. We left the light on. Was the last night my friend spent the night there.
Dang it.
What's so weird? Well, he would hang out during the day, but nightfall, nope, not happening. And if he did stay over any time after, whatever, the sun was starting to set, the lights had to be on. And it was strange. It was the strangest thing. I'd never experienced anything. I feel that my intent was to screw with this kid and kind of mess with his head, and that was kind of mean of me. And I wasn't thinking that, I'm being a horrible person. I'm just being a stupid friend. But whatever that was registered, that kind of malevolent aspect that I had in my behavior at the moment, and it called to it. You what's the thing? You get back what you put out. So yeah, it was really strange. And I don't know what that was, but it was the darkest. It was the same sort of feeling that I experienced standing in front of that bathroom. That same sort of just inhuman, freaking, like this thing's going to gobble me up, like a booger man, as we would call him here. He's going to pull me under the bed, and I'm just going to eat. It's just going to eat me clean up, and that's how real it felt, And if I had just seen it, it might have been one thing. He saw the same thing because I asked. He wouldn't talk. He would not talk about it for days. Finally, I said, "Look, I'm going to write down what I seen. If you can write down what you seen or whatever." And he kind of wrote down, black, big black, like dark black, big figure floating. And mine was, had a little bit more of the hooded part, which he said, yeah, I guess it kind of did look like it had a hood or just like a really big head. So yeah, freaky. I don't know, but that in itself was enough for me to want to start studying this and all that, which, the books came by accident. As I told you, I'm a fan of, paranormal and, old B movies and stuff like that. So
I know
there was a
awesome.
guy. Well, I don't, my family, God bless them, they don't get it. Back when I was a kid, there wasn't the term like, oh, you're a monster kid. Okay. We get it. We get you. You're a monster kid. I understand. But I was always true to that. A lot of the not Salem's Lot, Stephen King stuff like Salem's Lot and Silver Bullet and Cat's Eye and all that stuff. I've actually got, I don't know if you've seen the original Salem's Lot, but when there was a scene where they were checking a woman in a morgue and she starts coming up and the guy, the actor David So, who's playing like the lead in it, takes a tongue depressor, wraps tape around it, and protects himself from the vampire. I actually have one of those on my my book stand next to my bed. Not because I'm thinking vampires are to get me. I'm not saying vampires are real. They might be, but I've not seen them. But that was just a throwback to that. But that was the sort of kid I was. I was scared of everything, and maybe for good reason. But that was part of my character development. Just like your loss early on shaped who you are and probably made you a lot more empathic and sympathetic for other people's situations. That's probably why you do what you do. Yeah.
I know, just having that help and somebody out there to listen to you is so important. And a lot of times when people are going through these things, one individual will experience it and nobody else will. Sometimes after a lengthy amount of time, they'll start experiencing it too. But for the longest time, this certain individual feels like they're crazy. Am I going crazy? Nobody's seeing what I'm seeing and what's going on. So, just being able to help people really makes me feel good. And, you can go broke doing this, but I still do it and I love doing it. And then, the whole radio thing, like it's a whole nother aspect of it, and just sharing that information with people because people do have questions. And it's funny, we were talking, both you and I as kids would visit the library and check out every paranormal and ghost and whatever book that they had. And I know so many times I was so proud because I was the first person on the card for that book,
Yeah. Well, I come by my Addams Family kind of ribbing, legitimately. During the time that I was a kid, everyone had a striped T-shirt and the kind of bowl cut, the boys anyway. And so I know I would go in there and I'd be like, okay, I need this encyclopedia of ghosts, Hans Hoser. I'd come in there with my little grocery store list. I said, do you have anything on spontaneous combustion, ESP, remote viewing? Oh, and do you happen to have the English translation of The Rites of Exorcism, including, the signs and stations of the cross? I'm like 9 or 10, right? and they're like, they didn't know how to take it. And then after a while, I was like, oh, well, that's just the Asher boy. He's harmless. He just reads weird stuff. And one of my first book signings was at my library. I mean, I've literally wrote about researching the library in the book. So it's weird that I wrote about the library. Now it's in the library, and then people check it out, and they read it in the library. So it's sort of like a weird it's surreal, But I was going to ask you, did you ever happen to have, which that ball of lightning or whatever you saw, I mean, it could have been an elemental, it could have been a whole lot of different stuff, but a lot of people report that in alien abductions or alien visitation. Did you ever see anything? Because I had a small experience that I want to tell you, but I'm curious about what you had.
Well, this particular one, okay, I think I'm 4, maybe 5 at this time, and like I said, we had a thunderstorm going on in Siloam Springs, Arkansas, and so we're all gathered in the living room just hanging out talking and wait until hopefully the power comes back on, and that's when we saw it. And I've seen 3 different balls of fire. This one in particular, you could see the flames all around it, coming up and off of it. The 2 that I saw, and it started in 2012. My mom was the spiritual aspect of our family. My dad was the one who believed in aliens and UFOs and did have a paranormal experience after being with my mother. But I always wanted to believe, because my dad was so smart. He knew all the answers on Jeopardy. And so I'm like, I want to believe that this is true. My aunt tried to sell his book on aliens, UFOs, and other things. It was like a National Geographic special book or whatever, and I took it from the yard sale and kept it. But in 2012, I'm pregnant with my son, and myself and my 2 daughters went to the motorcycle rally because we generally do security for this gig, and I had to take them out because at a certain time, all kids must leave because then all the adult shenanigans start to happen. And,
right.
And so we're driving down the Rainbow Road in my 1972 Gran Torino, and Nova and Kinsey are both talking about this ball of light that's following us. And Mom, look, what is that? What is that? And I'm like, I can't look, guys, I'm driving. So as soon as I get to the end of the road and it's still following us, I stop at the stop sign, and I'm at the intersection of Highway 160B, which we live on, and Rainbow Road. I put it in park, I jump out, I look up, and there is this ball, and it looks like an orb because, it could be some sort of force field or globe or of some sort or whatever with liquid fire in it, and you could see the red and the orange and the yellow just going in a clockwise fashion, and it's about probably 40 feet up in the air, so it looked pretty small. And Nova's begging me, can we please just go home? So I'm like, all right, I just wanted to see what you guys are talking about, and I don't know what in the world that is. So we go home. I don't see it again until I believe it was December. So my son is 3 months old at this point, and I'm holding him and breastfeeding him and looking out the window because Dylan Redwine went missing on Thanksgiving break, and I'm thinking about him and his mom, and I'm hoping wherever he's at, because his dad in the past had hid his kids out from the mother, and he'd hide them in different locations. So I'm hoping, knowing already that he's not with us anymore, but hoping that he's out there and he's safe and he's warm, and holding my son, looking at him, thinking if anybody in the world could help me with my son, I would want them to, and that's when I decided to start Four Corners Paranormal. But all of a sudden, as I'm looking out the back door, it's a sliding glass door, and about 20 feet from us is a horse field and a fence line, and all of a sudden I see this ball of light coming down the back fence line. So I put my son down, and I run over to the sliding glass door, and I'm trying to get my phone open into camera setting, but I can't because I'm just like so frantic to get it done, and I'm just not getting it done. So I call everybody over. I'm like, you guys, you got to come see this. And at that point, I opened the door, and I stepped 1 foot out into the snow on the back porch. And as soon as I did, like, my gut told me, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. You have kids to raise. You need to go back in the house. So I closed the door. Nova and Kenzie and my husband are there, and they're all looking out at this thing coming down the fence line, and it's about 3 or 4 feet in diameter or circumference or whatever you call it, and it's got the liquid fire again, the red, the orange, the yellow, going in a clockwise fashion, contained in this force field or globe or whatever the heck it is. And my 2 daughters see the same thing. To them it looks the same, and that's the same thing we saw when we were coming home from the rally in September. My husband sees a globe with a huge bat that's glowing, flapping its wings at a really slow rate of speed. So that to me was weird, that the 3 of us are seeing the same thing, but he's seeing something different. Is it some sort of cloaking device or mind control or what? But I believe that was an alien orb of some sort. I don't think that was supernatural or paranormal. It was alien.
Yeah. Almost seems like, almost like was it the litmus test, or what do you call it? The Rorschach test. Okay, what do you see here? You know, because like I said, that sounds very familiar to like the plasma type balls is kind of what I'd call them too, that I'd seen in certain haunted locations. But I've had people see something very similar, but they said, oh, they saw a skull in it. You know, an animated skull, or they saw whatever, a picture or a scene, almost like the Wizard of Oz, where the witch is looking into the crystal ball and you kind of see what's going on, like that. I think some of that is, it plays on what you got going on in your head, and for whatever reason, it's very, very much goes along with the individual on what they see and kind of what they encounter and how they walk away with it. I had, and this was actually with my friend Mike. This is before that crazy stuff happened. We were camping out. We had like a little, like, this is back in the day when like neighbors would come, like we always had like a little fire pit. We made like kind of like a cinder block little thing, and we would put like a little. Now this does sound very Kentucky, okay? So don't laugh at me too hard. We would have like a couple 3 cinder blocks high, you know, like in almost a horseshoe pattern, you know, where like one side's open facing out toward you, and we would burn, you know, wood or paper or whatever. And we actually had the old timey refrigerator shells were metal. They weren't coated with it. They were just metal. And sometimes they would put hot dogs on them, or we would put whatever. We'd sit and make s'mores, and all the neighbor families would come, and they'd bring their lawn chairs, and we'd sit there and watch the moon and whatever, and just talk. And this is back in the day. God, man, they could be playing anything from Kiss, you know, Love Gun, like to, I don't know, Elton John to Rod Stewart or something. You know, whatever was bumping on the radio, probably some disco stuff. Right. Captain and Tennille, whatever. This is in the day. So, So here we are. We're doing our stuff. Well, after everybody split, me and my friend says, we're just going to camp out, man. It's cool. So we're sitting there. We're talking about, I don't know what we're talking about. Just whatever you talk about when you're 9 or 10. This is a time when you could like let your kids camp out in the backyard, not to worry about them getting abducted and stuff. Anyway, I see what looks like kind of a weird looking cloud. Like all the clouds are kind of going left to right. Well, it's full moon, and I see one that seems to kind of be going the opposite way. And I said, that's weird. It must be like a air current shift up there. I don't know anything about meteorology or anything like that. So I'm like, check this out, you know. And I said, it's kind of darker, you know. I said, maybe it's a rain cloud. I hope it don't get rained on, you know. So we're watching it for a while. Well, it takes a few minutes, you know, moving across the sky, and it gets to where it goes to the moon. I was like, oh, well, this is going to look cool, man. It's going to look like a vampire movie. It's going to black out the sky, you know, black out the moon. Well, it doesn't do that. It doesn't diminish it at all. And I'm like, wow, that's really wonky. It seems like it would have done something. Well, anyway, so we're still sitting there just talking, not thinking anything about it, waiting for it to pass. And it never passes. And I'm looking, said, like, look over. Did I miss that? And it's like, no, we never took our eyes off of it. And it's almost, and what it was, it didn't really look like a cloud. It looked almost like a great big, it's hard to describe it, kind of cigar shaped, but it was a little bit more rough looking, like a space potato. That's close as I can describe it to, because it had like little dents. And I thought, oh, well, maybe it's a meteorite or something, but it was big. It was huge and pretty big in the sky. But when it went to the moon, I don't know if the thing kind of did a 180 and went in back behind the moon. Maybe, I don't know if it was some sort of craft or not. But I mean, we didn't have visitations or anything like that I know of. It seemed like all that took about 2 minutes to go down. But when we like checked one of us had like a wristwatch or something, it had been about 7 or 8 minutes. Now that doesn't mean that we lost track of time. Most likely, could it have been lost time? Possibly. But it seems like you get certain people together. One of you might be a tree. One of you might be a lightning rod. You by yourselves maybe aren't powerful enough to amp something up, but you put yourselves together, you're going to get lightning strikes. So I think certain people have elements that draw paranormal, different uncanny experiences, and things like that. I've always had a friend. There's a handful or two of friends of mine, and we would be maybe riding around on bikes at night, and I'd look up and there'd be owls flying overhead. Owls fly around, but you would have them like over and over and over. In fact, like I have a little Steve Asher, I guess you would call it a banner or whatever, and it has an owl on it, just because I've seen them so much, in my childhood, which I know a lot of people connect that with abductions and whatnot. As far as I know, I've never been abducted. I had a friend of mine. Do you know who Barry Gunn is?
I'm so bad with names. I'm better with faces.
It's okay. He does a lot of research in Eastern Kentucky, and he does a lot of like MUFON related stuff. He would be a great guy to have on. And he told me he kind of ran over a checklist, and he said, "Have you had this?" Yeah, okay. So some of them could be kind of benign questions. I won't go into the questions, but for most part, I was hitting like 8 or 9 out of 10 out of like a series of about 50 questions. Like about every block of 10, I was hitting almost every one. And he said, "Have you ever done past life regression or just sleep? Where do you put you to sleep and ask you questions?" I said, "No." I said, "And to be honest, I'm a little scared too." And he says, "I get that a lot." I've not done that, but I would be interested in doing that. Have you ever considered doing that?
I actually, when I first started doing my radio show over a year ago, invited this past life regression psychic lady on, and she had offered to do it for free for me, and she's not too far away from where I was staying in Phoenix with my mom and sister at the time, and I was tempted to, but I'm kind of worried about somebody walking through my brain and knocking over furniture or whatever, or maybe I'm afraid of what they're going to find as far as things that I don't remember, because, your mind blocks certain things out to protect you. It's kind of like a natural born defense system, but I don't know. I'm still pondering it and thinking about doing it next time I go to Phoenix, but I'm kind of leery.
Well, okay, this is me, and it's not that I don't try to be a control freak by nature, but like even when I did bands and things like that, I wrote most of the music. I did most of the okay, here's a drum beat time signatures. Here's this and that. I wrote almost like, orchestrated it all. And the songs I wrote a certain way, I wanted them to sound a certain way. And I'm a perfectionist like that. But what I said was, okay, let's talk while I'm conscious. We will hit certain areas. Anything that deviates from that, I don't want that stepped out. Also, I want a witness in the room, and I want it video and audio recorded. So every minute, I know what was said, what was done to me, just for my own peace of mind. And that sounds like might not be a bad idea for you to set up some ground rules and
That's a good idea. I might just have my sister go with me and like you said, film it and be there. And she even offered to do it over the phone, but I'm like, no, I think it'll be better if we do it in person. And like you said, bring a friend. That's a good idea. And have it recorded.
Right. Right, because, I mean, they might go, okay, are you asleep, Tessa? Yes, I am. Okay. What are the numbers to your bank account? It could be anything. And I'm not saying it just because, you know what I mean? No, I don't know mine either. But you know what I'm saying? Because you could be down the road in 4 months and hear Old Town Road and start squawking like a chicken or something. They could plant any suggestion in your mind. But yeah. See, I'm still on the fence with a lot of psychic stuff. I think there's people that do good work in. I mean, don't get me wrong. I know some people will help the police, and I know some people will try to use whatever gifts they have for good. But then there's okay, well, I'll need X amount of money down, which if I go, hey, I want you to come here. You're in Pasadena, California. I want you to fly in. That's costly.
Right.
And if it's well, I can fly in, but could you possibly put me up somewhere? Or do you have a bedroom or a couch I can sleep on while I'm there? Make certain concessions for people, especially if they're doing you a big solid. But I've seen people that were and like I said, you may have a different view of this, and I'm not trying to step on toes, but people I've seen people say, well, here, we can certify you as this and that, or we can certify you as whatever, and you have little plaque.
$34.99 for the next 12 months.
Four easy installments, yeah, and there's nothing. Knowledge is where it's at. Learning's half the battle, as G.I. Joe says, but
it's definitely a good investment.
Well, I had debated on taking certain theology courses, maybe learning more about demonology and things like that, which, it's just learning and studying about different sort of demonic entities and the hierarchies, because there is a hierarchy. It's set up very much it's so funny because it's like a flip side, because there's a seraphim and different types of angels in heaven, but there's also ranks and things like that if you believe in it, in hell and things like that. So it'd be interesting to study that just for giggles, because I guess studying demons makes me laugh. But I would never go, oh, well, I am a demonologist. I am a certified blah, blah, blah. I am, certified, in regards of, doing my criminal justice stuff. And, which by day, I work with special needs adults teaching life skills. So I have certifications in that. But a lot of times you have people saying things that they ain't, pardon my Kentucky speech, and it's jive, and so you got to be careful, which makes it harder on every other legitimate, and what I mean legitimate, good-hearted, earnest, caring person. Most people are only going to know about that guy over there or that lady over there trying to pull a Miss Cleo on somebody, and
right.
I hate that. You're going to have people fake, it's just the nature of it.
Well, I would say I am certifiable, and I've worked long and hard to be this crazy. But, people, and they do sit there and say, I'm an expert in this field, and I think it's all about the ego, because in this field, and so many fields related to this, there are no experts. There's always going to be something different out there that you don't know what it is, that you come across that you don't know how to deal with, so you have to re-educate yourself and try to deal with it. But, yeah, my mom's like, you're so smart, you need to go to college, and that's what she does for a living, is signs people up for college. And I'm like, okay, you went to college, have you paid off your debts yet? And the only thing I'm interested in is parapsychology at this point.
Right. And that's almost, you either have to go to Chicago or there's the Edgar Casey, what is the ARE or whatever it is for paranormal research, but that's going to run you. Anytime I do, what little bit I've had to do, like public speaking and keynote speakers and stuff like that, I always started out and go, hello, I'm Steve Edward Asher. I don't know a thing. I'm nobody and I don't know a thing. But I watch, I try to remember, and I try to learn from the things I encounter. So I might know a little bit to know, but I know enough that I don't know anything. And I do that because it's true. And I think, I don't know, it depends on who you are. If you come for entertainment and you want somebody just to kind of tell you, well, this is what you need to do, and this is who, if you want like kind of a Dr. Phil kind of guy, that's fine. But I think more people respond to somebody who goes, look, I'm just like you, and I'm fumbling. How do you quantify the unquantifiable? How do you, we have, you've heard of WAG, right? A wild A guess. I don't want to cuss on your show, but
oh, that's all right.
That's kind of okay. Well, wild ass guess. That's kind of at best what we're all doing. Certain things work for us, certain things don't, and again, it's individualistic. You may do a thing, and I may try to mimic the same thing, but because I'm not you, and I don't have your life experiences, I don't have your and some of this has to do with genetic markers and history, because like you said, oh, my family's always been like this. My family's always been like, I had brothers and sisters and getting ready to call each other, hadn't spoke to each other in a while, and said, well, hey, I don't know, I just had a weird feeling. It's just weird, my son just got in a car wreck. And almost every time that it happened, something wonky happened, or maybe something good happened. But there was a immediate weird thing. One thing that happened to my mom, if I can tell you this, which both my parents are gone. They died in my 20s, and but my mom had a record player, back in the old day, and she was playing some whatever it was, juke joint music, 40s, 50s, Fats Domino stuff or whatever, and it was one of those kind of wind up ones, or whatever, and she heard her name was Myrtle, and she heard somebody say, Myrtle, I'm home. And it sounded like her aunt or whatever. And she looked down the hall and was like, and there's a big family. And she asked one of her brothers, said, hey, is Aunt Flossie, I think her name was, or something, said, is Flossie home? Said, no. And hadn't been gone, she went on a trip or whatever. Well, she come back to the room and she smelled what smelled like her perfume. And my mom doesn't have many paranormal stories. At least she didn't tell me a lot of them. And she said, I swear, I thought I saw like a little rose floating above, because she loved like rose petal perfume. And then it was gone. She like kind of rubbed her eyes and it was gone. And then, the end of this story, got a call the next morning at the same time that I guess she was in an auto accident. And I guess that I'm home means I went home, went to heaven or whatever. And that's common. It seems like it's more common than people want to believe. Either people want to believe things are nuts and bolts, there's no soul at all, or that everything's paranormal, everything's demonic or angels. There's no in between. I get turned around. Like when I visited Memphis. This is how I visited Arkansas. I drove down to Memphis. I was doing a punk show. I was doing a festival back in the day, and took a wrong road. And I'm on a bridge. And next thing I say, hey, welcome to Arkansas. I was like, hey guys, we're in Arkansas. We went to Arkansas. So I get turned around that easy. Imagine trying to go through some sort of dimensional vortex to another plane of existence, vibrational change. I'm
Right.
sure people run into the walls there. So I don't know. I think that's, again, comes down to family. And I think it's more or less certain people will, not so much that they gravitate. I don't think we gravitate toward crap. I think the universe gravitates toward us or steers us in the direction that we are supposed to be. I'm not saying it's fate, but I think certain people are earmarked for certain jobs, certain personality traits, certain spouses, certain hobbies. And that's just, why wouldn't that be true of dealing with certain spirits? At least that's the way I feel.
Yeah, and there's so many questions out there and so many different variations of what could be happening or going on. But I'd like to stop here because we do have to go to our second break. And just to let our listeners know, the music on this break is by Prime Example for the first song, and then we have Mystique for the second two. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Was a man in the hood, tricked, misguided, and misunderstood, till one day he cried out, Lord, save me, teach me the lessons of life, won't you raise me? Because I tried everything under my hat, and I found all my plans were tears in the whack. I need a hero, a real life camaraderie, to step in, receive me, and deliver a power play. Something to raise my head from the dust. It's a must. I find someone in whom I can trust. I must grow in knowledge, live what I learn. I'm so glad to meet you. Yo, my name is Vern. Lead me any way that you would, and I'll share. I need your power play. Yeah. Here comes another one. So good to be clothed in your right mind. Dreams to the front and all past behind. Memories of things you did so absurd. Came to the curb, now burn was the word. Cause often we're little now, problems can grind us. But with power from God, yeah, we all still victorious. Listen to the seed, the knowledge and digest the real only. Cause a trooper like Jay keeps it righteous. And it's present prime example of a vocalist, adjust your bubble. Leroy is like dangerous trouble. Trouble if you want it, peace if you with it. Never before known of a man who can stand it, but so irrelevant. So kick it in if you will, Lord. And I shield. I need your power play. Yeah. Here comes another one. For the knowledge, and now you're not guessing. When power meets the darkness, the devil's got you go. That's my Weasel, and now he's going loco. If you got a problem, God can solve it. Power from the general, and you're in his outfit. Why must the fifth stay dirty so filthy? Get off your rear and whitewash the pickings. Power for cleansing, power for sanitizing, power for us, power for the rising of the sun. Cause in your darkest hour, you can look up and express to feel the power up. I need your power play. Yeah. Comes another one.
Baseball, money making it rain fall on a big mall, owning the whole block, driving to the mailbox, cruising in my yacht. I gotta get up out this box. I want it all. I always knew that I would be rich, don't doubt for a minute. Speaking to resistance, hoping and feeling to give away $1 million. Just be chilling in the tallest building. Say hello to the mission and vision with me. Hello. Watch cars about 150 Rolex diamond luxury city. Next to Movado, motto cocked it before the arrival. Lamborghini with bass high, I could hear it all. Sit back, sun roof up, is the stars. High performance cars, super saloon, exclusive of rims spinning hard. Always wanted to build a park. Obstacles to enter. A lot more for the kids. Recreation centers. I want it all. Red bricks, cream coated, painted marble fountain as I pass. Walking the stone path, heated pool. Home theater for all of my family. Wanna do it for my city. Can't wait to see the chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. I want it all. Diamonds and cars. Building big yachts, close up the stars. Buying the bars. Own it is ours. I want it all. Big or small. No more of a downfall. I want it all. I want it all. I want it all. I could sign your baseball. Money making it rain fall on a big mall. Owning the whole block. Driving to the mailbox. Cruising in my yacht, I gotta get up out this box. I want it all. I'm inside of a dungeon, life involves repercussions. Could the consequences leave me boxed up, feeling suction? How could this bad mistake have me thinking ways to escape? Catching the case, wanting it all has been replaced. Look at a cellmate face, I know they can't relate. Trust in the soul, heck no, it's to stay safe. Up in the place where my food is cold on my plate. It ain't no breaks, it's a time to concentrate. Watching my back, got stabbed by too many snakes. Who times dragged against the bars is a rude away. Mind race, body cold, hard to embrace. The situation made me think, why did I miss the hate? And common sense of being solved in so many ways. During the problem thoughts, I forgot I want it all. Forgot I had a dream to rule it, forgot to remember that all my fans had a part that I can have it all. I want it all, staring at the walls, walking down the halls, wait for my collect call, supposed to be at a concert hall. Instead, I want it all behind bars, can't reach for a star. It's a fear, I want it all. 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 Diamonds and cars, building big yards, close up the stars, buying the bars, own it is ours. I want it all, big or small, no more of a downfall. I want it all, diamonds and cars, building big yards, close up the stars, buying the bars, own it is ours. I want it all, big or small, no more of a downfall. I want it all. I want it all, I want it all. I can sign your baseball. Money making it rain fall on a big mall. Owning the whole block, driving to the mailbox. Cruising in my yacht, I gotta get up out this bodice. I want it all. Mystique, mystique. I got dreams and ambition, I'm ready and I'm willing, I'm meeting this competition. You don't wanna be my dinner. The whole shift changed when the music bang. Love the look on their face. I got dreams and ambition, I'm ready and willing, I'm meeting this competition. You don't wanna be my dinner. The whole shift changed when the music bang. I just love to see the look on their face, and if I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. I got dreams and ambition, man. If I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. I'm ready and willing, even if I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. I'm meeting this competition. If I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. You don't wanna be my dinner. I'm about to do this to death, cause I know they watching. Don't understand the talking, tell that dog to quit barking. I'm an entrepreneur, so correct when you talking. Bet I get it back and take a loss to be a boss. Coming fast and I'm switching lanes with it, crisscross. Never messing with you, rapping ratchets, what you really thought. And my jab steady dreaming, chasing missions for the fam. Understand I'm flowing lands from the Milwaukee brand. Thought you knew you can't wear my shoes, not do what I do. It's a mob, I don't pick or choose, to stick it to the rules. Keep my beast above and beneath. They know I'm beauty. What you need, I got what you need. When it come to it, who been grinding all winter, so the summer extra lit. I've been in and out the booth trying to weigh up my greatness. It ain't no time to play with it. And if I slip, I'ma bounce right back, 'cause I was born for this. I got dreams and ambition, man. If I slip, I'ma bounce right back, 'cause I was born for this. I'm ready and willing, even if I slip, I'ma bounce right back, 'cause I was born for this. I'm eating this competition. If I slip, I'ma bounce right back, 'cause I was born for this. You don't wanna be my dinner.
With great precision, I'm on a mission. Lots of ambition, my transition. The time was ticking, willing and wishing. Just listen, I punch harder than Sonny Liston. They fishing, looking for teeth. It look like Lipton. They tripping. I am the king, whose competition? Collisions, conclusion is I'm in a position, lifted, transcending beyond their comprehension. Time to hang it up, swaggerific, the lynchman. You know how this goes. Just follow the street codes. We make it look easy, like we putting in cheat codes. Beauty and the beast is in beast mode. Haters on the sidelines, I tell them to keep score. I go crazy on the beat, tell Spaz to keep it low. You know Mystique, close with a toaster, you won't toast.
And if I slip, I'ma bounce right back, 'cause I was born for this. I got dreams and ambition, man. If I slip, I'ma bounce right back, 'cause I was born for this. I'm ready and willing, even if I slip, I'ma bounce right back, 'cause I was born for this. I'm meeting this competition. If I slip, I'ma bounce right back, 'cause I was born for this. You don't wanna be my dinner, huh?
Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in tonight to We Are Paradox Media, Late Night in the Rockies. Tonight we are joined by Steve E. Asher. Welcome back, Steve. It's been awesome having you on.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, it's weird how quickly the time has went. A lot of times, like most of my things I do, like House of Asher, and even with the I have a little kind of YouTube. They're only maybe 5-6 minutes at a time. But there's segments called History from the Dark Side, and a lot of it has to do with Kentucky history and strange things, like coffins found under courthouses, and like the Kelly Green Man and LBO Monster and all that stuff. But usually I'll do like an hour and a half on shows and stuff. So it's been a while since I've done one like this. But you do it pretty well. It doesn't really even feel like I'm doing a show. Just feel like a couple friends talking.
Heck yeah, and that's what I like, just hanging out, having a good time, and it makes everybody more comfortable, I think. But I just really love it. And I love learning from everybody that is working in this field, because like I said, there's so many different variations of things and so many different things that people use when they are out in the field. And I have questions about that, but you were talking about Vincent Price and B-side videos, so on and so forth, which I love. I grew up, you were talking about Art Bell, which I didn't even learn about Art Bell until this last year, and I listened to him, and I'd find myself going to sleep because his voice was just so relaxing. But did you ever listen to Dr. Demento growing up? Being from Kentucky?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my number one for the longest time.
Right, another one rides the bus and all that stuff. The old shaving cream song. It just says it's going to say something dirty, but it don't. And, oh yeah, Dr. Demento's my dude. I have a friend that. This is way before I got into corrections. It was around the time I'm working in radio, because radio does not pay. If you got a family, you're going to be very, very thin because you're not going to eat well. But
no, I'm just kidding.
well, I mean, but yeah, there's good skinny, and then there's corpse bride skinny.
Right.
But I had a friend named Harold, still a good friend of mine, and he was a big Weird Al guy. I liked Weird Al too, because even though I like hardcore punk, like Black Flag and Dead Kennedys and Minor Threat, like Circle Pit heavy bands. But I also liked quirky, goofy nerd songs, and was kind of a sci-fi kid. I started out as a sci-fi kid that got scared and then started reading about the paranormal, and then I kind of became the paranormal sci-fi guy. But Dr. Demento was cool, and it was always fun when, like I said, he would have guests on and stuff. It was sort of like having a musical horror host, because sometimes they would have like the old like Flying Purple People Eater and stuff like that on, kind of quirky songs.
I dug that a lot. He had, like you said, the horror along with the comedy. Like, that's what I love the most, is comedy and horror, and music's my number one. Like, I have to have music. When I was in boot camp, that's the one thing I missed the most. And I remember being on the bus going to the medical facility, and the bus driver would turn the music so low that everybody was so quiet because they're all trying to listen into it and kind of get that musical healing going on. But that's the one thing I missed the most, was music. You know, if I could live without everything else, I'd have to have music, and then I'd go out and hunt my own food, or, invite some enemies over. I'm just kidding.
No, I hear you. Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, I was just going to say, music, when I'm writing, I'll listen to a lot of stuff. I might listen to just ambient music. Sometimes, say, if I'm writing something that was Civil War earlier, I'll listen to chamber music. If I'm listening to something, like I was writing a story about a witch, and I'll find like weird kind of chanty, kind of creepy, put you in the mood, And I'm not talking about like, growing your own rose hips, whatever, and crushing up your own sage. I'm talking about like old, malevolent witches, old spooky, what they would call witches. So music plays a huge part of it, and I've often told people that, like, okay, you want to read this story, play this song, or if you want to listen, like read the Penitentiary book, play like the Johnny Cash, like Folsom Prison Blues album. Oh, yeah. If you want to listen to like some of the, like the one about the asylum, listen to some early Pink Floyd where it had Syd Barrett, the guy that ended up going crazy and stuff. Play some just sort of disturbing, haunting music, and it puts you in the right mind frame. It gets you, it hits all those elements, and turn your lights low. Not too low where you can't read, but enough to kind of you get in the mood. But yeah, it's weird, I guess, because like Dr. Demento, Art Bell, The Count of Five, Cecil Creep, Sammy Terry, which those last two were all horror hosts, and all of that kind of went together, and of course Saturday morning cartoons and all that went to shape me, because when I was real little, I wanted to be a cartoonist. I wanted to be a cartoonist or like a voice actor or a character actor, because I wanted to do all those crazy things that those guys did. But for whatever reason, I just gravitated more toward the paranormal. Who knows what I would be today on that. But yeah, I think it all comes together. Just like there's elements, your boot camp stuff, I guarantee colored a lot of how you are with people and how you look at people and your tenacity and whatnot. I'm thinking, even, I can't speak for you, but I mean, I know losing my parents young, losing our son, we'd actually lost a daughter between my oldest daughter and my middle daughter. She was stillborn. So we'd had a lot of death. We've seen a lot of death, comparatively. I'm sure there's people that's lost all their kids, and God bless them. I pray for them. But for me, you either get really bitter, or you get spiritual, or you become a seeker. And that's kind of what I did. I mean, I had my time. I was pretty mad, but you're going to come through that. That's all part of the healing process, all the states of grief and whatnot. And you come out the end of going, look, nothing's guaranteed. Tell everybody you love them. Appreciate every day, even if it sucks, because I guarantee someone's going to have it worse than you, and go on with it. And that's not me trying to sound humble. It's just a good way to roll with it, if you can. And I think that applies to everything. I think it applies to the paranormal, how you deal with people, and what you put out. I think it comes back to you that way, but I don't know.
Yeah. And there are different phases you go through. Like, you go through anger and resentment and all kinds of different things, but I don't know. I found, like, okay, so I lost my mom when I was 5, almost 6, and then I lost my dad. God, I was in my 20s, but he was 49 and 2 months old. So I lost both my parents at a pretty early age. And, you get bitter and you get angry and but then you learn different lessons. Like, I had a really bad meth addiction for about 5 years, and it took my dad passing away for me to realize, like, not only am I lying to myself saying I don't have a problem, but I'm lying to everybody who loves me. And that last night I could have spent with my dad before I put him on the Greyhound bus to go get checked out for his liver transplant. I could have been spending with him instead of chasing a high. And so thank God I quit, one of the lucky 6%. But I mean, there's so many different lessons to learn from it, and I've been there for many of my friends' deaths, and like you said, your own children's deaths, which I think is the hardest, your parents and your children, because those are really big parts of you. But no matter how good or bad, it seems like everything, for me at least, has happened for a reason. I've learned different things, and I've been there for friends in their last moments, and I think it's a part of my life. Like, I'm supposed to be there for people during these times and help them to the other side, or help those around them, and it can be difficult, but it is a part of the process, and we're all, spiritual beings having a human experience, and to mourn for those that we've lost, it's more for us than them, because they're really happy and free, and if they're good people, I mean, there's other variations to it.
Well, there's something, and when I say this, let me explain what I'm saying. Don't take what I'm saying as any sort of I'm here and you're over there. I never really got into drinking or drugs, but I had a lot of older brothers and sisters. Pretty much all of them had some type of addiction. I'm definitely an addictive personality. If I do ghost hunting, I want to ghost hunt or research. I shouldn't say ghost hunting. I don't have any ghost heads on my wall, but paranormal research, I want to go hog wild. If I want to write a book, I don't want to write one book at a time. I want to write 3 books at one time. I'm an idiot. I push myself, and I'm not saying I necessarily thrive on stress, but like, if I'm home, I'll catch myself, like, if I'm not writing something, or if I'm not setting up a guest, or if I'm not researching a location for a book or for a show or for an investigation, or maybe writing some music, because I also do music, I'm like, the hell am I doing? You're being lazy. Do something. And I have to go get away from the computer, set it down, watch a television show with your wife, play with the grandbaby, sit on the back porch and listen to the wind chimes and smell the mint. We have mint, like, here in between the house and my little studio. So at this time of night, it kind of lets loose the kind of aromatic smells and stuff. And that was like some mint my mom had, and it was a transplant from her house. And so it was just a really cool, mellow, positive thing. And I have to kind of well, I've learned that when you were a kid, sounds stupid. This is my correlation. This is my hillbilly genius moment. Okay. When you're a little kid, you ran up and down gravel roads barefoot and climbed trees and which, like, if you're in Kentucky, you never wore shoes. Not because we're Kentucky, but just because, or Arkansas, right?
You couldn't keep shoes or clothes on me as a kid.
Dude, oh yeah, I saw a lady the other day, a lady named Miss Flannery. She was really sweet. I was the youngest of 7. I always said there were more of them, but we ate the other ones. She knew I was an Asher, because we all kind of favor, which always made my dad feel good. But she said, "Son, are you an Asher?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." I said, "I'm Steve. I'm the baby." And she said, "Well, it's been years and years." I said, "Well, you probably didn't recognize me with clothes on." And she laughed, because I would run up and down the street. I mean, if I was in underwear, you were lucky. And I'm talking 4 and 5. I'm not talking 12. I ain't Kevin Spacey in it, running up and down the street. But yeah, that was me. I was nature boy. I was about it.
Yeah.
And but you felt free. You didn't have all that. And I think part of it is that you were grounded. So what I'll do sometimes, I'll go out and just stand in the grass. And sounds dopey, especially early morning or late at night when there's a little bit of dew on the ground.
No shoes.
No shoes, man. And just sit there and just breathe in that kind of ozone, that kind of that smell early morning has.
Yeah.
Especially when it's a little cool, little crisp. Maybe a little bit, maybe the dew's falling just a little bit still. You can kind of feel it misting on your skin or your shoulders. It's home to me because when I was little bitty, this area gets a fair amount of fog. It's a lakeland area, so there's a lot of lakes, and fog would roll in. And I'm talking like pretty thick fog. And I mean, the other kids would go playing out in it. I could imagine somebody driving down the street at night seeing like a bunch of shadows of kids playing, and they probably like hit the pedal. But we felt completely safe in the fog because we kind of knew, we knew where we were at. We knew the lay of the land. We used to play like there's a Cedar Hill, which is the big city graveyard. We would go there and we would look at the different dates on the stones. Fog up to our knees. It's just straight out of a Universal movie, but we weren't scared at all. But look at it now. Most people don't hardly have time. They're running here and there. How often do they go out and sit and just look up at the sky at night? Sit out, listen to the birds, listen to whatever you got, coyotes, chickens, whatever you got going on in your neighborhood. And I think you've got to do it. I really do. I mean, and this is the part of the show where it's like, oh, so Steve's turning into a hippie. Well, I'm not turning into a hippie, but
Being real.
It's really primal. Mm-hmm. And if you could maybe say it's a little bit more of a spiritualist mindset, you got your body, you got your mind, but you also got a soul or the essence of who you are. And your body's going to tell you if you're not getting what you're needing because you're going to have stress and you're going to have this and you're either going to overeat or overdrink or whatever. And I find if I do that, my compulsiveness is a little bit in check. So I'm not like OCD or nothing like that, but I do. Well, maybe I am a little bit if I have to keep my hands busy all the time. But I also know I'm on a clock. Everybody's on a clock. So that's why I'm, doing the books, doing the podcast, and doing like the little YouTube series. Because like you said, we're all on borrowed time. No one's got any guarantees. And I don't mean to say it cryptically. It's just, like you said, it's being real.
Yeah, and time is precious, and you got to take advantage of it. And, I come across people a lot of times that are depressed and don't see the point in being here. And it's like, look, you got a gift that a lot of people don't get to experience. A lot of people are taken way too soon, and you need to treat it as such. Treat it as a gift and take advantage of this time you have. Because to me, it is a gift, and it's so important to, learn these lessons and pass them on and so on and so forth and help each other, like raise each other up. That's so important. But you were talking about B movies and stuff like that earlier. Have you ever seen William Pattinson's Bloodbath Theater?
Man, that's way back. That's like along the same time of like Chiller Theater and stuff like that, right?
Well, William Pattinson, I've had him on my show, and it's actually a thing right now. He's got a discussion group and the Bloodbath Theater group and his own personal page, but he's got all those Vincent Price classics and all the B-sides that you can't find anywhere, and so it's really awesome. And I just had to tell you about that because I know that you love those sort of things, and you should check it out. I'll send you the info so you don't have to write it down. I was just gonna.
Thank you. Yeah, because like I said, as I told you, kind of off air, my office studio / whatever man cave is what like if I had seen the neighbor had all this, I'd go, that's the coolest kid I know. That's where I want to hang out. Right. I've got like I said, all the B movie posters and the stuff like old werewolf masks and just all that kind of stuff, from the time. So yeah, definitely I'd like to get to know this guy. I was going to ask you, there, like I said, Trilogy of Terror that had the little fetish doll, the Zuni doll that come to life in the movie, and Karen Black was having to fight it and all. It's more or less a precursor to Chucky. And there was another movie, 1972. I'm not talking about the cartoon from the 90s. There was a 1972 movie called Gargoyles, and it had Ben Casey. Mm-hmm. Ben Casey was the guy. He was like, okay, do you remember the movie Revenge of the Nerds?
Yes.
Right. ogre and all that, right? Do you remember the super cool Black Dean, or a guy that was over that chapter?
Right.
And like the guys were messing, they were going to get ready to get beat up, and he come up and he kind of like pointed a finger at him, like, don't do it. And he was like super cool. That was I think it was one of his first appearances in a movie, and he played these gargoyles. Okay. And I don't know, I don't want to be too explicit, but it scared the hell out of me. I seen that show when, I was born in 1969. I was like 4 when it came on television. Scared the holy hell out of me. I don't remember this, but my brother said when I would come out at night, or if I come out at night after seeing that, I would kind of be looking around. And it's like, what are you watching for? I was scared of 2 things, gargoyles and ninjas. Don't know why. If I saw a gargoyle ninja, freaking forget about it. I would have lost it. But gargoyles and ninjas, because they both can climb up and jump off on you.
Right.
I know I sound super dopey, but that was where I was at as a kid. But I love that movie now. It's one of my favorite movies. It's just like The Exorcist, just like certain movies.
Well, like you're saying, Silver Bullet. Like you have that poster. Okay, I have Stranger Things. I have that poster, and then I have an Alien and some other crazy, like, spaced out artwork my daughter did. And plus Nikola Tesla and the Beatles and whatever else in here. Like, we all have our certain things that mean something to us that we put in our like you said, your man cave, or for me it's a bitch barn, but I need to expand. I need to make it a little bigger. But I mean, Silver Bullet, like, that was one of my all-time favorites as a kid, as well as Pet Sematary. Oh gosh. Go ahead.
We'll go. No, I was just saying, Silver Bullet hit me twofold. I was kind of at the age, was it like early to mid 80s maybe? I would have been 12 or 13, right? I loved it because, it had one of the Corys in it, and he played a special needs, or, a challenged kid, because of the wheelchair. And I've always said, because my youngest little boy has CP and is in a chair, but I said, I've always wanted to get him, like the motorcycle type thing, and the wife's like, no, that's not going to happen. But, where he can rip up and down the road at 80, and I'm like, yeah, it's probably not a good idea. But, and also the girl that played his older sister, I don't know what it was. I thought she was the bomb. And initially that's why I liked the movie. Oh, it's got a special needs guy and the sister's kid. But then I watched the story and I really fell in love with the story. And then when I read the book, because there's so many things, I'm not a reader by nature. I mean, I read a lot of comic books, definitely read a lot of comic books, but it took me a while to kind of get into reading, novels, because like I told you earlier, I wasn't joking when I said I'm dyslexic, and it was a real challenge to be able to read something and it makes sense, because the letters and numbers would flip back and forth on me. So, but yeah, that was like 2 of the movies that really set me off, and I loved all those made-for-TV movies. The Salem's Lot thing, and like the Rose Red thing, and It, and Kolchak the Night Stalker. I got a poster of him over here as well, and that really shaped me as to who I am. I mean, obviously there's a lot more to me, but like that core, you melt me down to that little kid, I'd be content sitting and playing with, my Star Wars or Star Trek toys, and, my, Universal model things of the Wolfman and all that stuff. And, that's just, I guess, who I am. I'm at the point now, I guess, at 50. Always heard, if you don't grow up by the time you're 50, you don't have to. But I guess I'm growing up, but I never, what was the thing from Step Brothers, don't lose your dinosaur? I try not to ever lose mine, so.
Yeah. I always tell my kids, hey, don't grow up, it's a trap. And, I try to keep the youngness about me, as far as, like, I dress up every Halloween, and I'll go out with my kids and enjoy the time, and try not to take life so seriously, which could be really hard sometimes. But I was wondering about your learning of Thai ghost beliefs. Like, what do they believe over in Thailand, and what did you experience over there as far as investigation or paranormal experiences?
Okay, I'll let me kind of backtrack. I have to kind of give you a little bit of the surroundings. I went over there. I was working in the penitentiary at the time. I went over there. We were supposed to be there for, I think, 12 to 15 days at the most. Thailand does not do a lot of adoptions to the U.S. It took some doing, but we were lucky enough to be able to do it, and we had to fly over there, and it was like go through the time zone. It was like 28 hours in a plane, like one way. It sucks so bad. But so we went there, and we got set up, and we spent a few days there, and got. They have soys, which are like the little side streets. Like in Germany, you got strands, and then you got soy in Thailand. This is in Bangkok, and culture shock. I'm from a town of about 12,000 people. I mean, I've been in bigger towns and, like I said, the Four Corners area and all that, but this was an absolute trip. And I saw really interesting, beautiful architecture, shrines on every corner. I saw a lot of wealth, and I saw a lot of poverty, a lot of times on the same street. And it's like the worlds were different. It's like the two worlds didn't connect. I was somewhere in the middle, and I could see them both. And it's like the poor could see the rich, but the rich didn't notice the poor, and it was just really strange. And they're beautiful people there, but it just there's sort of a mentality of like, well, if you have a deformity or things like that, maybe you did something in a previous life, so you're paying for it now. Like you ever heard somebody like you have a blemish or a wound or whatever it looks like, something like a splotch that was maybe where you were murdered in a previous life. Well, anyway, we were there, and there was a coup. There was a military coup, and they shut the borders down. No air, no water, no nothing. While we were there, we were free to visit and go around and see stuff, but they would have like trucks going up and down the street, guys with like submachine guns and masks, and it was pretty heavy. But we would spend time at the orphanage and stuff, and I got to talk to a lot of the workers, and they would take me around and show me the shrines. And I was like, look, I want to understand about your culture. And there's like things like Nam Nang, which is sort of like a mother monster spirit. So they had their monsters too on top of ghost culture. I won't go into all the names because I'll mispronounce them anyway, but like say you're eating and you drop a spoon with some rice on it or noodles or whatever. You don't pick it up. You leave it there, and eventually the staff can pick it up, but you don't pick it up because they have what they call hungry ghosts. And these are probably people that starved to death due to some reason. And if you take their food, which is kind of like follow you, and they'll haunt you. Simple things like going to cut bananas, which is one of the big things there, bananas and dragon fruit and stuff like that. I don't know if you ever had dragon fruit. And you have to do a thing with like incense and say sort of a prayer and thank the spirits before you cut it. Or again, they will follow you back. Or if you travel by boat, which a lot of produce comes from the jungle and they bring it in, it'll flip you. There's different, spirits of, the giant snakes and the spiders and different type of creatures out there. The monkeys, you have to pay homage to all these things because everything has a process and a condition. It's kind of like that. Remember Robert the Doll? Where like,
yes,
don't go snapping pictures. Yeah, don't do this. You got to kind of go, hey, is it okay? I hope it's okay if you don't mind. It's extremely respectful, and it's a little madness. It's like ancestral worship, which there's also things you have to do for ancestors to appease everybody. Like if you go to a lot of like Asian restaurants, and you'll see like a general sitting on top of the wall, and there's like oranges and apples and incense and different things around it. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. But it was like a general, or a samurai setting. If you notice, especially in buffet style restaurants, because I'll tell you a story about that in a second. But that's because they're feeding and appeasing the house spirits, just like back in the old days when you'd go, like you had wooden shoes, you would put your shoes under the bed, facing in, and that sometimes they would put something like a snack or something in the back of the shoes where the heels go, where these things wouldn't take you, they would take the snack. So if whatever it's hungry, it's like, well, hey, an animal's less likely to eat you if it's not hungry. But the same worked in for spirits too. It's really weird, but I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but any buffet style, I can say buffet tonight, buffet style restaurant is from the region of Fujian in China. Our other little boy is from China. He's actually born in eastern Kentucky around Berea. I always call him my Chinese hillbilly.
Aww.
And his family, they're all from Fujian. And we were talking about, I was like, what is that? And they said, that's for ancestors and for home spirits. And they said, yes. And I said, okay, well, tell me more about it. And so between them, the people in Thailand, when we were doing a layover, we had to stay in Japan for a little while, in Tokyo. And they let me go. They and I was like, hey, while we're doing it over in Japan, let me talk to you. Talk to some people. These are some experts, and give me the oldest person that you can find. Because first of all, they're the ones that's going to know everything, and they're also not going to BS you. They've lived a long life. What are they going to do to them at this point, right? And I would talk to some of the elders in the communities. And while we were in Thailand, back to Thailand, we were there a month and almost 2 months. And because we were locked in, we couldn't leave. And this afforded me the opportunity to go sit in shrines and talk to people, and them take me and show where, okay, this is why we do this. This is why we hang this certain type of fruit on this tree at this time of year, because of this certain spirit that's supposed to be active. It's interesting, and it's confusing, and it's maddening. Do you know anything about the Kraus?
No.
I'm not sure
I
if you're.
believe so.
Kraus is okay. In Thailand, it's kind of like, if you go to Europe, you have BBC One, BBC Two, BBC Three, BBC Four.
Right.
That's their channels. They have that in Thailand similarly as well. One is a history channel, and it shows, they have kings, and they're very, very protective of their king. The orphanage that my son was in was run very well. It was the princess of the country's kind of pet orphanage. And she'd go there and make sure these kids had everything they needed, other than parents, obviously. But my son was treated very well. But I was watching a show, and it had, like, you've seen stuff like The Grudge, and people kind of walk weird and creepy. It's just an Asian element, and their spirits that do that. But the Kraus will look like your mom, will look like your sister, will look like I'm sorry to mention your mom, but your uncle, your cousin, whoever's family. And you'll go to bed. And they'll go to bed, and it's almost like, I think it almost is almost like astral projection, and maybe that's where the concept of astral projection come from, or maybe that's where the belief come from. I think there's a crossover, and somehow it got twisted up one way or the other. Anyway, the Kraus will go to bed, and but by night, their head separates from their body and travels around and drinks blood of family members, of pets, of neighbors. It's not like they necessarily are going for revenge on an enemy or something like that. But the thing that's really gnarly is when their head separates. It's not just like a flat cut off neck. All their entrails come with them. And what happens is they'll go and feed, and all their organs will blow up because they're full of blood. And what happens, sometimes they'll catch one that's before it's able to go back into its body, because it has to absorb the blood before it can get its organs back into its neck. And that's a lot of times how they would capture, because there's people that swear, in 1927 in Bangkok, we had a rash of Kraus,
Holy
attacks.
Crikey. That's insane.
Right? I'm telling you, it's like, you've heard of, have you ever heard of the Highgate vampire?
I don't think so.
Okay. In England, in an area called Highgate, it's around the Jack the Ripper part of London. And there's a guy named David Fugate, and he did a lot of stuff in the 60s and the 70s about it. They actually had what they said was vampire captivity. There was people like, you could see where they were digging into graves to hide and stuff. And they would pull soil into like mausoleum, into, you can see where the indentions where they were sleeping in the soil. And which sounds like cult activity, right? But supposedly one of the caretakers, grave diggers, sextons, or whatever I think they're called, had encountered something and they went after it. And the thing acted like, like how people are on like bath salts, right? They're just crazy. He thought, well, this kid's high on LSD or something. Well, anyway, the kid kept coming at him. It was a young, kind of more Nosferatu-ish looking. And he kept telling him to get away from him, and he kept coming at him. And I don't know what he had, a sickle or something, and he swung it at him, and it kind of went through him in half, and he turned to vapor and disappeared. And that happened a time or two there. And so it's one of those things, there's certain diseases that can make people look like werewolves, or certain diseases that make your canines longer and things like that. But that's a hard sell. That's a hard one for me to say, I don't know. And it was this type of deals. The guy that said this was a solid citizen, wasn't into flights of fancy, wasn't a drinker. And it was really weird. And then stuff like that happened in Thailand. And but we don't talk about it. So that's when I was saying, I'm not saying there's vampires, but maybe there are. I don't rule out anything, because how am I authority on that? But it's extremely interesting. I mean, we had, have you ever heard of, I know I'm jumping from things, but you ever heard of Spring Hill Jack?
Sounds familiar.
Okay, it ties in around the same time of Jack the Ripper, and he was seen in London. He was kind of a good-looking guy, kind of handlebar mustache, like a dandy, bowler hat, and he would come up and he would walk the same streets that Jack the Ripper would be on. I think it was a few years after him. Well, he would happen upon women, and he was a creep. He would kind of try to lure them down a back alley and whatever, and can I give you a ride in my carriage? And then when he'd get them there, he would try to like rip at their whatever, like a corset or whatever they were wearing, and bang them over the head and stuff. Of course, they're going to start screaming, and then when people are alerted and they hear somebody coming, he'll like doing, that's a horrible sound effect, but almost like a go-go gadget hills or some point, and he would jump over 10 or 12 walls and up across and run across the top of buildings.
Yeah.
Well, they never found the guy. They never found him. And the thing that was also weird is that he had some sort of apparatus in his cape or his cloak, almost like a bat, almost like bat wings, almost like you'd see in like a Batman movie. You open it up and it looks like a bat wing. And he would go and glide down, because I'm thinking that figured he'd mess your knees up, but he would glide down. And so that was really interesting. Then I found out in me studying for the counties of Kentucky book, we had this happen in Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, wow. Roughly
around the same time. Yeah. It's really weird. There's so much stuff that you wouldn't think from your area. You might, think, certain states, out west, well, there's a lot of ranches and skiing and stuff. And there's that, just like there's a lot of hunting here, but there's also things that we can't explain. And the cryptid, and that gets into folklore, and that gets into curses, and that gets into all this other stuff. And that's what keeps me coming back. It's the paranormal has never disappointed me. Other than the behavior of a handful of researchers and certain trends and stuff. It's always been there, and it's always been a source of amusement and entertainment, and it's my safe place. I feel comfortable, just like like when I was a kid in that fog. That's where I feel I belong.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel the same way. It's like you said, a safe place, and the people you meet out there that are into the same thing, I consider, as far as my team and some friends and listeners on my show, like, that's my paranormal family. That's where I can share just about anything, and people aren't going to think I'm crazy. So it is a very nice and comfortable place, and I agree with you, as you were saying about the grounding. You know, go outside in the grass, don't wear your shoes. I mean, I ran around like that for so long, and it's really good for you, indeed. So, you were worried about kind of plugging your books earlier, but I do really want our listeners to know exactly what books you wrote and where they can find or buy them.
Totally. Well, I'll give you kind of run down the list in a minute too, but if people want to go to kind of like a one-stop thing that has links to all that, my webpage is like www.steveeasher.com. That's all lowercase and together. And that has links to my books, the radio show, the stuff I'm doing on YouTube, pictures of some of my paranormal investigations, you know, some of the blogs of talking about God knows what. Who knows what's on there. There's 100 different things. So steveeasher.com. But most of my stuff at this point, I just decided to do self-publishing through like Kindle Direct Publishing. So it's all on Amazon. It's in ebook form or it's in paperback form. And as of today, as of releases right now, that's out and available. Hauntings of the Kentucky State Penitentiary. There's Hauntings of the Western Lunatic Asylum. Hauntings of the St. Vincent's Academy. And we're going to have a total of 4. So this next year I'll be releasing the next penitentiary book, and I'll tell you the name of that in a minute. But as of being released, there is also, I have a on ebook and also in more like a brochure form that I have. It's the Great Mud Flood, the thing that we all forgot. And this basically touches on something I never heard of. There was a kind of a alternate in the 1600s or 1700s. We had another very catastrophic worldwide flood, and if you look at places like in St. Petersburg, the big cathedral, and a whole lot of different places, they have buildings that were underground, or like windows, doorways that opened to underground. And some of these things you could say, well, there's an earthquake or whatever, but this was all over. And I know there's places like Seattle that, you know, they built over old cities, but there's a lot of places where, like in the early advent of, like, say, the Russian cathedral I was telling you about, that you saw hardly no one in the roads. Everything was covered in mud, and it looked like they were digging the church out. Why would you be digging out a brand new church? It doesn't make any sense. I know you get a certain amount of inches of dust and settlement that covers things up just naturally every year, but this was way beyond that. And it was talking about a place called Great Tardia, which was kind of like a major empire that was and had parts of China and all of Russia and a lot of Europe. And I mean, it ties in with Nikola Tesla, and supposedly he had certain advanced technologies, because supposedly this was done through weather manipulation, like a HARP program. And all these different things that he talked about, you know, death rays and this and that, and free energy and all that, was remnants from that time, that either he was a descendant of that or he discovered something in the Ukraine or where, you know, whatever. So it's kind of an interesting thing. But and like I said, the books that are coming out next year will be Hauntings of the Kentucky State Penitentiary, Habitual Hauntings, which is going to be more detail about some of the hauntings I didn't put in the first book. Let me see. Short Stories for Darker Nights, which is a collection of, you know, just, you know, short stories. It touches on everything from sci-fi to paranormal to the occult to almost, you know, Lovecraftian style gothic horror. And then I've got Kentucky County's books that will be coming out either later that year or the next year after that. I'm pretty much written up into 2021 to 2022 at this point. And I'm just kind of taking it as it comes. And I don't know. I may write these and say I'm good. I've written enough books for now. I would love to see some of these eventually get on a like a Netflix or an Amazon or something, and maybe even an existing show that wants to touch on penitentiaries and different weird things. I've been lucky enough to touch on a lot of different types of hauntings in different locations and all that, and touch on different paranormal things. So I don't know what happens with it.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And I've seen some shows, like you were saying, on Amazon and stuff that aren't even that great, and you've got a lot of really good stuff going on. Also, where can people find your podcast, The House of Asher?
Okay, well, kind of like you said it. Like you said at your intro. I usually record through Stitcher, but Amazon or iHeart and Stitcher and okay, let me think. There's a whole list. iTunes and like the Apple stuff, and then there's SoundCloud, and just pretty much any of them. And the cool thing is, if you got a smart TV and you can get tuned in and stuff like that, you can pull it up on that as well. But as of on YouTube, you would want to go to the Asher House of Asher podcast, which it is carried through, if it's okay, Paranormal UK Radio, which carries me kind of globally. Like they're a England-based show, and they've been very, very, very nice to me. Because I never know, because I definitely have sort of a wonky Southern flavor, and some people are good with it, and they kind of take it in stride. I think they're just like that crazy Yank, and they roll with it. Right.
I think we all enjoy each other's accents. I was at Applebee's last night eating, and I was trying to pin down the accent. At first I thought UK, and I was like, no, that's from England. That's English. But I used to have a really bad accent. When I moved to Miami, Florida as a kid from Arkansas with my dad, I used to get haggled and hassled all the time about my accent, and particularly how I said the or the. I don't remember how I said it when I would read it, when we'd have to read out loud, and this girl would always give me crap about it, and so that was one of my big things, trying to break my accent. But when I go back home, which I'm going to October 16th, and then I'm going to Tennessee, and then we're going to go down to New Orleans and do a paranormal investigation down there. Do you know about Chad and Alta Dillard? And they wrote a book, Or Abducted in the French Quarter.
It sounds really familiar. When did that book come out?
Oh, dang. Oh, snap. I don't know. But I've had them on the show, and so we're going to go down and check out the French Quarter and see what we can find. They've had a few more experiences since they wrote the book, and I'm just really excited. I've always wanted to go to New Orleans, so this is going to be different. It's not going to be any, Mardi Gras or big old party, but it's going to be amazing. I can't wait to visit the cemetery there as well and see what I pick up.
Well, send me some links. I mean, I've got a lot of different guys. Like there's a guy named David Dominy, and he had written a book about old Louisville, Kentucky, and it touches on everything from how my gargoyles. There's reports of some sort of flying gargoyle, pterodactyl type creature over the old part of the city. There's also the place called the Pink Palace, which I am writing about. So like Ben Mears, I am writing about the Marston House. This house is got a really old history, and it even supposedly ties in with Aleister Crowley, who's one of the interesting characters that I've always found compelling in sort of a weird way. I know some people say he's like the Prince of Darkness, but even the devil has some good stories from time to time, I'm sure.
Right.
But then he would be a good guy to check out. But yeah, I mean, if there's anybody that you're looking for, like a certain type of person, Kevin Stokes is really well versed in Kentucky cryptids and Bigfoot, especially. I think we could probably give each other notes and stuff all night. So yeah, if there's any type of show, like, hey, do you know somebody that knows a lot about, exorcism, or hey, do you know somebody that knows about, mountain witches? And I'm like, yep, here you go.
Yeah, anything under the paranormal umbrella I want to cover, And I want to learn. And that's a big part of this, is not only for myself, but for our listeners to learn about these different things and ways of protection and grounding, so on and so forth. And just hearing other people's experiences and feeling even more comfortable in their skins. But I really did want to thank you so much again for being my guest tonight, Steve. It's been amazing having you on Late Night in the Rockies. And I had a wonderful time, and I hope to have you back again sometime. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, it sounds great. Anytime. And, hopefully by the time I'm back on, the other books will have dropped and stuff. And, maybe we can get a little bit more into the the minutiae of some of the details and stories, because there are really extremely strange things that happen to everyday people. That's what I tell somebody, is that I'm just an ordinary guy that's into extraordinary circumstances. And I've been really blessed. And I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you so much again for being here. And we do have an after party that we do after the show. If you'd like to hang out for a little bit, our listeners come in and they can ask you any questions that they might have. But I would like to thank you once more for being here on the show. It's been awesome.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, I appreciate you having me on, man.
And I want to thank everyone out there on We Are Paradox Media, Late Night in the Rockies, Facebook, Spreaker, Twitter, Spotify, iHeart, Google Podcasts, Tumblr, YouTube, SoundCloud, as well as TuneIn Radio. You guys don't forget, we are all in this together. Together we can make the world a little better, and we can change the world. Just lift each other up and carry each other on. You guys have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and I hope to see you back here tomorrow night, where we have Mr. Jack Kenna on the show. You guys hang in there, take care of my ewes, and if you would like to come to the after party, just call 1-970-335-9596. That's 970-335-9596, or you can look me up on Skype at Tessa Thomas-Peterson. Nighty-night, love and light. Take care of my ewes, and we'll talk to you later. Right now we're listening to Prime Example, My Inspiration.